chat is working. Chat. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. As you can see by the title, I hope, it's just live QA session. So bring your questions. And I have some actual backup questions. Basically, I'll be on YouTube comments or Reddit or, answering ZRemesher Academy questions. And I always want to point to a video. And I always think I recorded a video and I didn't. So while I'm waiting for people to show up, I'm going to go ahead and answer some of my own questions that pop up occasionally. So actually, this one just happened last night. So let me move this down so I'm not distracted. There we go. So let's say we're making a foot. I'm going to go over here. Let's switch over here to green metallic. I'm going to grab a sphere, drag it down on a canvas, go into here to edit mode, make Polymesh 3D so that we can sculpt on it. If we go in here to polyframe, we can see our object here. If I turn on my floor, I can see we're Z forward, X is left and right. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just kind of scale this down into kind of a foot shape. Now, there we go. And also, if you want to scale along one axis, you can hold down Alt. You can kind of scale just on those axes. You can kind of shrink this down. Now, if I go in here and I turn off my floor, I want to start sculpting on this shape. You don't have to go into Dynamesh. In fact, if I'm going to have my polyframe on, let's go ahead and turn this to Skin Shader. We'll go in here to the standard materials and just swap it out with Skin Shader 4. And I'm going to go through here and we're going to tap X to go across X symmetry, which is going to be under Transform, Activate Symmetry across the X. And we're going to make a foot shape. So here's the front of my foot. And then from the bottom here, feet aren't symmetrical. So we're going to tap X to go out of symmetry now that I've done all that work. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to kind of curve this inwards. We've got the heel, kind of if you look at the bottom of a shoe here, you've got the heel on the back, and then you've got a curve on the inside of the foot. And then it goes up here to some toes, right? If you want to, you can go in here to Geometry, Dynamesh. We'll just go ahead and Dynamesh this. This is scale dependent. So, the smaller I make this, the smaller, it's good. This resolution is going to stay the same. This geometry doesn't change. The resolution doesn't change. It's just the bigger your object is, the more of those polygons are going to fit on the surface area that you're sculpting to. So that's kind of how you can control resolution outside of just, cranking the slider up and down. Also, this little dot right here, if you turn that to an open circle, it will over crank the amount of polygons you're able to throw at an object. So that's something to keep in mind. So we'll go ahead and turn that off. And you know what? I'll keep this at 128. That's fine. So if you ever, change your resolution and nothing happens, you can always go in here and just shift or smooth or just update the object a little bit and then control drag, and then you'll see that it'll actually update. So here is our foot, and then from the side view here, it's going to go up to another part of the body. So in that case, we could represent that part of the body with a BI, brush insert IMM primitives. We'll hit M on our keyboard, and we'll grab one of these cylinders, insert cylinders, fine, and let's go ahead and drag that up. So we've got a couple body parts happening now. So again, I'm going to hold down Alt, and we're going to scale just in that one axis. And the other cool thing about this is we now have polygroups. We have a polygroup here, a polygroup here. And if we want to go ahead and make toes, we can continue inserting cylinders, or we can hit W and control drag off a copy of this cylinder. And again, we can do a uniform scale and then do a scale along two axes to kind of go through here and be like, okay, this is our toe. And then here we'll say, and then control drag over here. And again, if we want this to be the same length and we just want to scale it down, we can use this. Or if you want to scale it down uniform, sorry, I keep repeating that, but it's a good thing to know. And then control drag over here, and then control drag over here. How many toes is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll go scale this one down. And then finally, the little pinky toe. Now you could go through here and start sculpting. Instead of going ahead and Dynameshing all this together, what I would probably do, just to make things easier to work on, just keep it separate. So I'm going to go over here to subtool, and I'm going to hold down Control Shift and select Control Shift tap this object, and then we're going to say split hidden. That's going to split it into its own subtool here. And now I can go through here and be like, okay, the bottom of the foot's going to be a little flatter. So Control Shift, we'll go ahead and clip this back to kind of flatten it out. And then of course you can go through here and you can kind of smooth it out if you want to. It's going to go I think something like, bring in your reference if you want, but it's going to kind of taper down to the corner of the toe, to the big toe here. So your foot shape's going to be something like that, right? So we'll go out of solo mode, and then we'll tap on our heel and toes. These are all one polygroup, so if I Control-Shift tap, nothing's going to happen. I can do Control-Shift drag over this over a little piece of this one, and then do Control-Shift-A, which is visibility here, grow all. And then if I do a, let's go over here to split, and then we can just do a split hidden, and then all my toes are in one subtool, and then this thing is in another subtool. Now, I don't need to do much to this. I could go ahead and be like, okay, this needs to be a little thinner, and then maybe put some little bumps on here for the ankles or whatever. Start sculpting on this. One thing I could do is I could go down here to, if I go back into solo mode, we can go in here to polygroups, and we can do group by normals. And you may be wondering, like, well, why do I care if I'm just going to be sculpting if this has a polygroup and that has a polygroup? Well, when I eventually ZRemesh all this together, this polygroup will come in handy. That'll interact with this polygroup here. And in fact, if I want this bottom piece to be its own polygroup, so when I ZRemesh it, it's going to follow those lines. I can hold down Control-Shift. We'll use a knife curve instead of a clip. We'll go ahead and just knife the bottom. So there we got a nice polygroup here. And then I can go and reset this. We can kind of scale that back down. Back here to the toes. Again, it's probably easier just to sculpt on these toes separately. One easy way to do that is you could go, it's a couple different ways you could do this. If you go in here to split two parts, if you go to split the similar parts, these are all the same geometry, so I don't know that it'll work, but if you do split the parts, anything that's not vert welded, if I go in here, you see these things aren't really, like the verts aren't merged together. Yes, they're overlapping, but if I do, Control-Shift, Control-Shift-A, you'll see it's one solid object. You could also go in here to back down here to polygroups and do auto groups, and now you've got a separate polygroup for all of these, and then you can do Control-Shift tap any of these and just work on them separately. If you want them to be in their own subtool, again, you can go in here to split two parts, or now that they're all separate groups, you could say group split. So now every single object that has its own polygroup will be split into its own subtool. So then you go through here, and well, how do you make toes? Smooth them out and all that good stuff. Now, let's say I'm having a good time. I'm going through here and I'm sculpting. And if you want to, you can control drag this to redynamesh it. Your polygroup will get pretty ratty. We can salvage it. It's not a huge deal, but just be aware that, Dynamesh does what it's going to do. So we have all these different subtools, and we have a foot, and we have some kind of, a little bit of control over, let's go ahead and pull this heel in, our polygroups, but not a tremendous amount. But let's say we want to start sculpting this as one object here. So, and usually when you're doing toes, like this little baby toe will be over here. It'll kind of be mashed into this one. That's another thing we talk about toes. There's always a, and we could also juggle this too. If I want to, like, say, do a mask across all these toes and lift them all up at the same time, but they're across separate subtools, I'm just going to go through here and just do Control-E, which is my hotkey for merge down. So it's like, yeah, they were separate, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and merge them down temporarily. I'm going to hold down Control, go in here to mask lasso, and just right across that knuckle, just go ahead and grab, Control tap to invert that, and then we'll just go ahead and move this up, and we'll give ourselves a little bit of that shape here. There we go. Just thinking about volumes, basically. And then if I want to, again, I just got to go in here, I have a custom menu for polygroups, auto groups, and then we can just go back in here and say split, group split. That's totally fine. And then we're back to working on separate subtools. So of course, you don't have to stick with one method or the other, or whatever works for you. Feel free. Some people have longer middle toes than they do big toes. Don't make fun of them. And then there we go. We've got our basic foot, right? So now, and again, we've got some of the toes are overlapping, and all these pieces are feeling good. So now it's like, okay, I want to sculpt on this as one contiguous object to make it a little bit more accurate. A foot isn't separate objects. I want to sculpt across these things, right? However, if I go through here, there's a couple different ways you could do this too. You can grab this top one here and say, just hit merge down a bunch of times, or you can go down here to merge visible. You'll see it doesn't do anything, but it does pop out a little separate object here. So you can just tap on here, and now you can see we have all our polygroups here, and everything is merged. However, if I were to go in here, If you do merge visible, you're going to notice that Dynamesh has been turned off. It's not a big deal. Just go in here and turn it back on. It's going to reset the default resolution to 128. You can drag from the resolution slider on your object and it'll pick that resolution. So if you want to match this one, you can pick it. If you're like, you know what, I'm going to do a little detail sculpting, so I'm going to raise that resolution up a little bit. You can Dynamesh this and you'll notice like, oh, these things are all sticking together, right? You can try undoing and raising the resolution up, and eventually you will get a high enough resolution where they won't stick together. If you get within that tolerance threshold of the little grabby polygons that it's going to make. So what you want to do before you do that is go through here and try and move this apart. Now there's a couple different ways you could do that. You can go in here to brush, auto masking, and you can do take this mask by polygroups up to 100, and then the first polygroup you use your move brush on or your standard brush on, it'll only affect that one polygroup. If everything is one polygroup and you don't feel like messing with that, you can knock this back and you can turn on topological. Again, we're under our move brush here. These are global. You can change your range up or down if you want to. And now the first object you click on that's a separate piece will be the only piece that gets affected. So I'm going to move this again. Yes, technically this thing will probably be overlapped at the end, but it doesn't mean I have to always have it overlapped. I can kind of move it out just a little bit so they're not touching. And then you can try and again, Dynamesh. Now, instead of Dynameshing, what I would probably do is go over here. Let's say it's all one polygroup and we want to reset up our polygroups. I'm going to go in here and say polygroups, auto groups. So everything that's not vert welded is going to get its own polygroup. And then this top one here, I can Control Shift Tap. And again, if I want to put a polygroup along here, I could go through here with my Z modeler brush and, paint on it, but I can just go in here and say group by normals and it'll group. If for some reason your max angle is like set to 90 or something and it's not doing anything, just crank that down. And the lower you make that, the more it's going to pick up angle changes in your object. So Control Shift Tap to bring everything else back. And now we've got a bunch of really nice polygroups, except for our bottom one. If you want to get that one back, we could go through here. I'm just going to grab the slice this time, and we'll just slice a polygroup right in there. So now I've got information for my ZRemesher. Now again, in order to merge all these things together, your first instinct is probably go in here to Dynamesh. Instead, I'm going to hit W on my keyboard. We're going to go into the gear icon, do a remesh by union. That's going to basically run a subtool, what is that, Boolean, and it would treat this singular object as if it was a bunch of subtools where you went down here and said, okay, Boolean all these subtools, you turn on live Boolean, then you hit this Boolean button and it'll Boolean together all your objects. It's not a Dynamesh operation. It doesn't try to, make geometry out of this. It literally just says, hey, you're a solid object overlapping this solid object. I'm going to sew you together. So now if you hold down Shift and Smooth, these are no longer separate objects. They're sewn together, but you don't have the fallout of Dynamesh doing some weird stuff. The other cool thing that this does is give you nice clean borders for your polygroups. So now we have a bunch of polygroups that we can use for our ZRemesh operation. So speaking of ZRemesh, let's say first, before we do that, let's say we had a bunch of detail on here. Beautiful detail that we don't want to lose. Just to make this more obvious, I'm going to put a little smiley face here. So I want to capture that detail onto my foot geometry. So I'm going to hold down Control and tap this latest point in history. If it's a really long history and it's kind of hard to Control tap it, I'm just going to go in here to Edit, delete older undo history. And then now if I go through here and like Shift Smooth, you'll see, oh, there's my history line. It's brand new. I'm going to Control tap the latest point in history. It's going to store those vertex positions. So now if I turn on my polyframe again, we can go in here to, what can we do? ZRemesher. Go in here to ZRemesher, and we're going to say, I'm going to look up the polygon count. 7,000's pretty high for the lowest res of our foot. So we're going to say, you know what? I can change the target polygon count down, or I can go in here and I can turn on half. It'll just dump that down to half. Adaptive size is basically, if you have this high up, if you're like ZRemeshing cloth that has a bunch of wrinkles in it, any major angle change, it will try to build in more geometry where it needs it. The lower this is, if you go down to 0, it's going to try to make nice even quads everywhere. Go ahead and stick with nice even quads. That's fine for this kind of lo-fi model here. And then of course we already have polygroups set up to where we want it to look at. So we're going to go ahead and say keep our groups. the groups are already smooth. These booleans and these slices result in a very smooth result. So we don't need to smooth it. So it's just going to melt our object basically. So I'm going to take that smooth all the way down to 0. So now if I hit ZRemesher, it's going to ZRemesh that poly count in half, keep our poly groups, give us new geometry. Everything's all welded together. So again, if I shift smooth across here, and there you go. And now maybe we want to go even lower. So I'm going to say keep half on. We'll just hit ZRemesh. We'll just keep ZRemeshing this down. But you'll notice we did lose our detail, and you may have some problematic areas you want to go fix. This, if I undo, if you hold down Shift and Smooth, that one looks, it's trying to do a lot. So sometimes you can go in here and you can help it by going in here and collapsing and stuff. I think this will be okay. I'm just going to go through here. I'm going to go in here with my smooth brush a little bit and just go and help it a little, just to kind of be like, hey, you know what? You got mostly everything right, but I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to go through here and just collapse some of these edges and smooth some of this geometry out, and yeah, get a result, something like this. So now we've cleaned this up, but we want to get our details back. Well, we stored those points in history. So I'm going to go back here to project history and just tap that, and then hit Control D to subdivide. Oops. Looks like when we went low, let's say ZRemesh, just keep an eye on it, half. Looks like a hole opened up here. Now, here's something you could do. Even on Dynamesh, sometimes holes will happen. I'm going to go in here to Geometry, Modify Topology. There's a mirror and weld distance here. I'm going to crank that up just a little bit and then hit Weld Points. If that's not doing enough, even if you like crank it all the way up and it's just not welding any points, turn this to a closed circle and then go back down and then crank up and then you'll start seeing things start to weld. So now when and again, you can do a hotkey or a custom menu where you ZRemesh half. There you go. Keep groups is already, on, and now everything, there's no holes. It actually helped this over here as well. It did a little bit of a better job. So that's nice. Also, you'll see that the slice over here, sometimes it slices through, but then sometimes it'll leave like little aliased sections in here that it has trouble with. So if we ZRemesh half, you can go through here and you can kind of go through and be like, okay, you could hold down Alt and start painting and then tap Shift while you have this held down. If you want to go through here and just kind of re-straighten this line, you could also go in here with the Z modeler brush and collapse an edge in here to kind of, again, just straighten these areas out, give it less ambiguity to think about. And in this case, we might want to go in here and say ZRemesh same, and then just ZRemesh that result. And there we go, a lot nicer. So now we want to get our detail back. It's still stored over there in history. So, and again, I'm kind of using my custom menu, but just to kind of show you, instead of going and digging through these menus, I can just go through here and project. But I'll be nice, and I'll go over here and I'll say, okay, project. We have color and geometry on, so if I had a poly paint, we'd be projecting that back too. But in this case, I just have geometry. So project history, and then I can hit Control D, which is geometry divide, and then project history, and then Control D to divide, and then project history, Control D to divide, project history. Now there may be some spots, if we turn off polyframe, where maybe project didn't get enough. You could go in here and say, project this distance up if you wanted to. What I usually tend to do is do BHR for history recall, and that will allow you to manually go through here and just project, like say you had like a little area it just didn't want to grab, BHR, and then go through here and then just use your history recall brush to brush this back up to where it should be. So now we've got all our Dynamesh detail back. We have brand new geometry. We have subdivision history now. So if I turn off polyframe, I can go down to subdivision level 1 and we can work on our volumes here. And then I can go to subdivision level 2 and we can start working on our primary forms here, maybe work on some knuckles here. If I want to, I can also go in here with my move brush topological still turned on. So at this point, if you want to kind of push this baby toe into that other toe, feel free. You're not going to Dynamesh anymore. You're done Dynameshing. So we can go through here and just kind of move that in. And then now you've rebuilt your geometry. You've had polygroups stored. You've controlled your remesh properties, and you're good to go. So that is one way you can go through here and you can kind of work separately and then merge everything together without using Dynamesh, and then go in here and finish out the rest of your object while getting your detail back and getting subdivision history. Now, having said all that, sometimes you'll be going through here and you'll be like, okay, cool. I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of ZRemeshing and I've done a lot of detailing up. Let's go through here. We'll grab our Damien standard brush. We'll just kind of dig in. Actually, we'll use Dam Standard 02. This one you'll have to download from the internet, I think. We'll kind of dig in a nail bed just real quick. And again, we have polygroups. You can Control-Shift-Tap if you want to get in here and like work on this object separately from the others, and then Control-Shift-Tap to bring everything else back. And so we'll go through here and we'll put in a little bit of a nail, and then we'll go back to our Dam Standard 01 or Dam Standard regular, and we'll hold down Alt, and then we'll start pulling out. Okay, we've got a nail here, and then I'm gonna hold down Alt here. We're gonna, maybe we'll go in here to just our standard brush. We'll kind of build up around here. And, you know, obviously feel free to work on this, as, you know, get your reference out and make everything look beautiful. I'm just going through here and just adding details so that we can talk about, okay, great, but now I feel like I want to Dynamesh this again, or I want to change my geometry, or I want to add the rest of the leg to this. So how do I take this data that I have and supplement it? There's a couple different ways you could do that. You could go in here to, there's a freeze subdivision levels here. And occasionally that'll also pop up if you go in here and just turn on Dynamesh. It'll ask you, do you want to freeze your subdivision levels? When I'm Dynameshing, the answer is always no. For me, your mileage may vary, but I don't ever want to like go into freeze transformations when I'm Dynameshing. So I just say no in that case, and then I'll just re-Dynamesh. Now, of course, when we Dynamesh, all our toes are stuck together. We're kind of back to square one, right? So I don't want to do that. If you do want to change just a little bit of geometry, you can go in here with subdivision history, and instead of Dynameshing, go in here to freeze subdivision levels. That'll drop you down to subdivision level 1, basically, and allow you to make changes. So if you wanted to go through here and be like, you know what, this top cap here, I'm going to hold down Control-Shift, and then Control-Shift-Drag, geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, hover over an edge, close convex hole, and then close that off. We'll hit Control-W on that polygroup. So we've changed that geometry. You know what? We could even do this. We can hold down, we can hit W, Control-Tap that polygroup. We can Control-Drag up. Oops. That's weird. It gave us the exact same polygroup. So with these two polygroups shown, Control-Shift-Tap, I'm going to go in here and do polygroups autogroups, which we did earlier. That'll give them anything that's not vert welded in visibility. We'll give it a new polygroup. So now if I Control-Tap this one, I can Control-Drag up. And in fact, if I Control-Drag up and then let go of Control, I can continue Control-Dragging, and it will continue adding geometry. So there we go. We've got the lower part of our leg we've added, and we can go through here and we can start, you know, putting in a little bit of a calf shape here if you wanted to. So that's one way you could add geometry. Now, we're still in free subdivision levels mode. So if you wanted to go, and again, if you were like, I just wish I had one more edge loop in here, no problem. Insert single edge loop, pop a little edge loop in there, you're good to go. Now, basically what this is telling it to do is saying, hey, when I hit this button, it's stored those vert positions. And then when I hit this button, it's going to project the detail or this geometry to those vert positions. So sometimes along those borders, if I can, it'll mask them out. So I'll Control-Drag and you're like, oh, okay, that did kind of a weird thing, but that's okay. You can just go in here and smooth it out. Again, remember you have subdivision level, so you can drop down to subdivision level 2 and, you know, fix any errors. And then subdivision level 3, you can go up and fix anything. And then subdivision level 4, you can go up and fix that. So that's how you can temporarily freeze and store a state and then project detail back. And then you'll also notice that your little toe over here, still separate. It's fine. We didn't make any changes, so it didn't need to mask it out and do anything crazy. So that's another way. Now you could do that manually as well. So if we wanted to go through here and add a knee, for instance, we could, and you know, let's say your subdivision level 1 geometry is fine, but you're not married to it. So what you could do is you could say, I'm going to say subdivision level 4. Let's go ahead and append a sphere. And we'll Alt-Tap the sphere so we can select it. And we'll go ahead and scale this down. And we'll go ahead and add a knee here. And then maybe we'll go in here to BI brush insert, IMM primitives, hit M. And we'll go in here to insert cylinder again. We'll just put a cylinder on here. And then again, Alt, drag here. So we got kind of a thigh going. And just to make this more obvious, I hit Control W to make that. There we go. Green, purple, and the rest of your polygroups, right? So what I could do is, this is at the highest. Let's go ahead and turn these things here. This is at the highest subdivision level. So if I were to just merge this down, it's going to kill my subdivision levels, but it is going to merge this all into one subtool. We still have all of our polygroups available. So now what I could do is go in here to edit, delete older, undo history. So I have, just to make it easier for you to see, I am going to go back in here again because I'm going to go through the entire process again just a little bit faster. I'm going to say move this one out with topological turned on, because again, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that remesh by union. So I'm going to make sure nothing's sticking together that shouldn't be. And then again, one more time, go in here, say quick remesh by union. It's going to keep all my details and polygroups. All of these are going to be stuck together. I'm going to control tap these points in history, and then I'm going to go through here and say, in fact, let's take this one. We'll do a quick group by normals there, just to get a polygroup on the top there. And then we're going to go through here. Instead of half, I'm going to say, let's go in here where you would be. ZRemesher, we're going to say turn off, same, or half, or anything. We're going to say target polygon count of maybe 5,000 polygons. Again, we're going to keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. We've stored those points in history. So instead of freezing and having that do this work for us, we're going to do it manually. Oops. So yeah, we boolean this together. So yeah, ZRemesher, adapt the size down to 0. We're getting it in nice even quads. It's going through and looking at our polygroup borders and giving us new geometry. There we go. And now all we have to do is, well, a little bit of cleanup work here. And again, that might have been an instance where going through and doing a weld points might have cleaned up a little bit of that Boolean. Maybe has some pieces that were, it's going to build in anything that you throw at it. So if you have a little bit of geometry, a little bit of tiny geometry that's problematic, it's going to look at that problematic geometry and think you want to keep it sometimes. So we'll just go through there and simplify that. There we go. So let's do it. You know what? Same, ZRemesher same is fine. We got new geometry, new polygroups. Everything's good. We have those points stored again. So now really quickly, I can do a project history, Control D, project history, Control D, project history, Control D, and then project history. We're back where we started. We have new geometry. We got all our details back. We can go through there and we can put this little baby toe up against there again. We could smooth this out, any transitions or sculpt across, and we have subdivision history. So we can drop this down and work on our primary forms, secondary forms, tertiary forms, and boy, what a beautiful leg. The other thing we can do with subdivision history is, oh, now I want UVs. Oh, but I have, it's hard to UV 271,000 points. Well, it's not hard to UV subdivision level 1 of 404,000 points, right? So let's go in here to Z plugin. So we have a high res object, not a big deal. If we want to UV it, go in here to UV master. It's not symmetrical, but it does have polygroups we want to use maybe. We're going to say work on clone. That's going to duplicate off this whole object at subdivision level 1. So you see we have no subdivision levels left. We've turned on polyframe. We have polygroups here. If we want to merge some of these, we can. Control Shift Tap between them. Boy, it wants to keep some of these, right? Control W to make that all one polygroup. You know what? I'm going to keep that bottom here. The toes being separate is fine. That being separate is fine. We'll make the whole leg one section here. So you can basically set this up as the UV islands you want to see. Have polygroups turned on, unwrap, then we hit flatten. There you go. There's all your objects flattened. You can hit W and control tap this and, rotate this around or whatever you want to do. And then we'll say unflatten. Now, if we go in here and we say check seams, I put a seam right down the front here. There's two ways we can fix that. We can go in here and we can say enable control painting. And then over here underneath, that was, so that you one thing I forgot to mention, you can enable control painting on your ZRemesh. So over here you can say use poly paint, and then you can paint in, you can change this color density, and that'll be like a 2x multiplier density, polygon density, and then a lower polygon density. We didn't use that with our ZRemesh, but it's there if you need it. A lot of control in here. But for a control painting in UV master, what we can do is we can say, okay, I'm going to, let's turn off polyframe. I want to attract, and then I'm going to go over here and say, I want you to when you put a seam on this object, I want you to really, really consider attraction, putting it back there. So now if we go in here and we hit unwrap again, and then we do check seams, you're going to see that seam line is along the back now. Yay. And then of course we can also do a flatten. And there we go. So you can use that as a way to control. You can also say, okay, maybe it's close, but you know, we've got a front seam here and I want to put my seams exactly on an edge. So I'm going to say, copy these UVs. We're going to go back to our high res object here. We're going to say paste UVs just to show you that it did indeed work. I'm going to go ahead and turn off colorize as well. We're going to go down here to UV map and texture map. So underneath texture map, we can say create new from UV check. It'll go through. It's like, yeah, you got UVs. If you hover over this, if you see any red parts, those are overlapping UVs. We don't have any, so we're in good shape. So back here in UV map, you're going to see we have a create unwrap. This is going to allow us, if we go back down to subdivision level 4 or subdivision level 1, it's easiest to work on, you know, your subdivision level 1 here. If we go down here, we can say, we can use our creased edges, symmetry, crease seams. So basically, I want to crease our seams that exist right now. So I'm going to hit this crease button, and that's going to put a crease on where our edge seams are for our UV islands, right? So on this toe, for example, it's like, you know what? I don't want this to be the seam anymore. I want it to be on the bottom. All you got to do is go BZM for your Z modeler brush, hover over this edge. We're going to say crease edge, and then hold down Alt, and we're going to uncrease this edge here. And then we can go through here, and on the bottom here, we could just start tapping these edges. Now, if you want to make this a little bit faster, you can also hover over a point, and then you can say crease shortest path, and you can say, okay, this point here to this point here, and it'll go through and choose the shortest path for you. Now we have a crease down the bottom here. So with creased edges on, symmetry off, unwrap, you can hit unwrap now, and it will unwrap your object based on the creases. And now if we do a morph UV, you're going to see that toe line, and you can see it's kind of bumpy. This is if you want to sculpt on it. If you don't want to, you can turn that bump down to 0 and then morph UV. And now you can see here's our UVs. The seam has been moved. Our polygroups, our original polygroups from our original object are still set up fine. So there you go. You've Dynamesh sculpted. You've transferred that to higher res geometry. You've UV'd that. You've made adjustments, and you've remeshed it, and you've projected your details back, and you UV'd it, and you have subdivision history, and you're off to the races, and you have a beautiful foot. Whew! Okay, that took longer than I thought. John Yu, how's it going, man? Oh, yikes. So, dog to the vet. We were walking our dog, and again, I don't want to give you vet advice on a internet forum, but we were walking our dog, and our dog stopped on these rocks, and there was a dying rat, and and our dog wasn't scared at all. It just put its foot on it because it wanted to study it, and the rat bit it. And the vet basically said, if the rat bites your dog, it's not a big deal. It's basically if your dog bites a rat and gets the rat blood in it, that's the more dangerous part. But apparently rabies isn't carried in. I always thought, like, if you got bit by a rabid animal, that was the bad news. And apparently it's, I don't know, maybe that's for humans, I don't know. But they weren't concerned about the dog. So at least in the rat bite scenario. So good luck, though. Hopefully that's the case there as well. Yeah. Okay, so question. Michael, do you have this issue on a tablet with right-click navigation? If you alt right-click and tap on a tablet that scrolls document. I haven't had that. Okay, so basically, right-click navigation. Let's talk about that. So when I'm in here and I'm really close on an object, you can use the safe action. These little white lines will show up. If you're back down, I guess it stays there. When you're zoomed in and you want to use traditional navigation, like holding down Alt and moving, well, if you're on an object and you hold down Alt, it's going to want to sculpt, right? So you have to go over here and into the safe action area, and then you can use navigation. Now, if you want to, navigate right here in your screen, you can use a thing called right-click navigation, and that's underneath preferences. Ooh, it's been a while since I've been in here. Interface, navigation. So there's two things in here. Right-click navigation, you probably have this enabled as well. So I tend to disable this. I'm going to do a lot of right-click navigation. Basically, the right-click pop-up gives you this menu, access to a bunch of cool stuff. However, when you're right-click navigating, sometimes that's annoying. So what I'll do is I'll go in there and I'll just disable that. And then whenever I right-click, it doesn't pop up and I'm just navigating. So you can use, I'm using, the best way to explain this. I have, you know what? I forgot. Let's do this. YouTube, ArtStation, resources. So here's my YouTube channel. Here's my ArtStation page. Now, the reason I'm giving you both is, if you're on my ArtStation page, you can go here to ZBrush What's New, and this is all the ZBrush stuff. So it's all laid out, and you can go through here. Here's the intro to ZBrush one. You can click on here, and then sometimes there's extra goodies in here. In this case, not too much, but you can go through here in this and just watch all these videos, or you can just click this little watch on YouTube. It'll pop you out to YouTube, but it's just a little nicer organized. On my YouTube channel, if you go to the home page and you scroll down, you'll see the whole section, ZBrush What's New playlists. Here's all of them. You can hit view all, and here's all the What's New stuff. So again, intro to ZBrush. If you click on here, oops. If we do a Control F in here and we do navigation, there we go. Navigation, standard, and classic, and then I guess that's it. So that's video 2. You can go in here and you can watch. And this is what I was looking for, is basically on my pin here, I have the bottom pin set to right. You know what? I guess I could do this too. Sorry, I'm just kind of a roundabout answer to your, probably not an answer to your question because I'm not sure I can recreate it, but here I have right click set to this one and then middle click set to this one. When I'm navigating in, like, you know, Max or Maya, I use middle click with my tablet. So that's how that's set up. So long story short, I can go through here and now I can, let's get to something that's a little more descript here. So we have, so here's classic navigation. I'm just kind of holding down Alt and using the background to kind of zoom in and zoom out. But if I'm really close to this nail, so I'll switch over seamlessly to right click navigation. So now I'm tapping the right click button, and now I can hold down Alt with right click and I can zoom and pan. The other cool thing too is if I'm using classic navigation, it basically, if I tap, if I'm sculpting on a toe, I can just, as I'm sculpting and I'm making changes to my object, that's going to be the local pivot. That's determined here. This little local transformations, I think. Is that the one? Button is on centered object's true center. So instead of the object's true center, it's just going to rotate around what you're working on, which is really nice if you're working on toes and fingers, because you don't want it to, like, again, I'll show you how it's going to work. If this was off and I'm sculpting on this little knuckle down here and I use traditional navigation, it's going to rotate from the center of the object, which is, it's like, whoa, I was working on the knuckle. Now why is this object going all over the place? Just turn on that local, start sculpting on that knuckle, and now it's going to rotate on the last point you clicked on. However, right-click navigation ignores that and basically just rotates around the part that you, and also zooms in on the part that you're looking at. So if I want to zoom in on this knee, I don't have to, like, sculpt on the knee and then zoom. All I have to do is hover my cursor, right-click navigation, hold down Alt, and it'll zoom in here, or down here, or right here, or over here. So that's sometimes useful as well. So anyway, right-click navigation, going through here, and right-click and navigating. Now, Alt, right-click, and tap. So Alt, right-click, and tap goes into, yeah, it stops. Oh, I guess it goes into sculpt mode. I've never actually done that. Thank you. Interesting. So Alt, right-click will move and pan and scale and rotate, but if you tap, and I still have Alt held down and right-click held down, for me it goes into sculpting mode, which is kind of cool. And then if I tap again, or I let go of Alt and, no? Oh, if I let go of right-click and choose right-click again, then I'm back into navigation, and then tap. Huh. Tap, tap. It kind of locks it and then allows me to kind of sculpt. That's weird. I've never, I didn't know that existed. It scrolls document. How do you turn that thing? If you were able to turn it off, I would imagine it would be somewhere in here, I think. But I didn't know that was even a thing. Thanks for bringing it up. I wish I had brother. Sorry, I was reading the next one. I wish I had a real answer for you, but for what it's worth, that's all I know about right-click navigation. Is ZBrush 2025 coming? I have no idea. Frankly, right now, I personally am, not that I'm ever really in the loop, but I have no clue. I'm just kind of an enthusiastic young man about ZBrush. The Brian Fellows of ZBrush. If you so kind to show the process of preparing low poly and high poly meshes for exporting and baking. Yeah. So the thing about, well, I mean, we kind of just did it. So the low poly prep is kind of what you just saw. If you want to use ZRemesh, that's the process I always use. So we've already UV'd this thing, so we're actually ready to bake. We have a high res here, and we have a low res. And the cool thing about this too is if you wanted, how to explain this? Well, do I have I'm trying to remember if I have a decent, I mean, I'm sure I must somewhere in here. There's got to be something where I've gone through. You know what? I think probably the closest thing I do have, it is still ZBrush centric, but we do, I think under the character creator pipeline body, if you scroll down to like low res creation, clothing, accessories, and then I go into like substance painter and bake. That's what I would, so you can check that out. That's what I would call like arbitrary baking, where essentially you have an arbitrary low res or multiple low reses that are going to bake to a single high res or vice versa. And it has nothing to do with like subdivision levels, basically. It's like you go in here to, I'll bring up a better example in just a second. But you would have all your high res in here. You would label it _high. You would go in here to export, and you would say export FBX. That'll export one file that has a bunch of objects in it that are all labeled just as you named them in your subtool. And then you would go through and you'd make a low res version of them, and then you do another export, say _low as an FBX, and then you would go into like Substance Painter or Marmoset or your favorite baking tool, and you would say bake by namespace, and it would bake all your high res assets to all your _low res assets, and you get a beautiful, nice bake with no baking errors across close objects, basically. In this case, because we have a high res foot, beautiful foot, and then a low res subdivision level 1 with UVs and a high res associated with this, you can actually go down here to, if you want to bake a normal map, you can just say normal map, tangent normal map. If you want to flip your green channel for DirectX or OpenGL, you can hit create. We got to tell it, hey, do you want to create your normal map? It's because sometimes you do, where it's like, I'm going to create a displacement map for levels, subdivision level 1 to 3, and then a normal map from subdivision level 3 to 4. You could do that if you wanted to. But in this case, we're going to bake a normal map from our low res subdivision level 1 all the way to our high. So I'm going to say subdivision level 1, create normal map, and boom, there you go. If you want to change the size, you can go in here to texture map, no, UV map. And you could say, 2048 or 4096, 1024. In fact, you can go in here to your, where is that? Is it under texture map? No. UV map border. You can crank this up and that'll bleed your UV map border a little broader. And then again, just hit create normal map and there you go. You've got a normal map. Now, if you want to get this out of ZBrush, clone it. That'll put it into your texture palette also up here. And then you can have it selected and then you can say export. And then you can go ahead and turn this off. Same thing with displacement map. Same thing with texture map. If you had a polypaint on here, you could say new from polypaint. And that'll basically bake your polypaint to a texture map. And then again, clone texture, export it out. You can also go in here to Z plugin and say multi-map exporter. There it is. You can go down here and say, hey, I want to export a bunch of stuff for this. So in this case, I don't even think it matters if you have subdivision level, which subdivision level you have. Just select one here. And if we are going to have a poly paint, let's go ahead and say, color, fill object. We have to have RGB turned on. Color, fill object. I think, what's going on? Color. Oh, I have texture map turned on. When I captured my white, it turned the texture map on. Just turn that off. There. Now we can see our poly paint here. And just to make things obvious, we'll have standard brush selected, Z add off, RGB turned on, and there we go. We have a poly paint. So now when I go down here and say, texture map new from poly paint, There we go. There's our texture map as a texture map. However, let's go ahead and turn that off. We can also go down here and say, I want, in a multi-map exporter, I want to bake a displacement, a normal, a texture, an ambient occlusion, 2048. Yes, export options for all of these. Ambient occlusion, you can change cavity map, normal map, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, anything you want to change in here, you can. Flip G or whatever. And then we can say, create all maps. It'll go through. Oh, we got to, let's put it on my desktop. Save, doop, 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 doop. It's going to bake, and they're through all those maps on my desktop. And if we want to just check them out in here, we can say, okay, there's our AL map. This one, this one, this one. Now, I don't tend to bake a ton of maps in ZBrush, but that's, you can totally do that. If, big caveat, if your low res is the subdivision level 1 of your high res, you can just use ZBrush. If it's not, let's say, I'm going to duplicate this off, and then for this one here, we're going to say subdivision level 1 delete higher, and then subdivision level 4, I'll say delete lower. Let's say this is just a just a Dynamesh mesh, and then our subdivision level 1 is just a completely arbitrary mesh with its UVs, has nothing to do with our high res. You know, completely different geometry, there's no connection between them. In this instance, I would do something like, call this one leg low, call this one leg high, and I would do that for all my high res. I would name underscore high, and then all my low res underscore low. You could even get a little fancier, and you can kind of group your low res as like leg underscore low underscore tassels or underscore sock or underscore shoe. If you wanted to bake multiple low reses to one high res or vice versa. Like I said, you could be a little fancy with your naming, but generally speaking, leg high, leg low. Now, I'm not going to export both of these as an FBX. I would say, okay, I'm going to turn off the leg low visibility, just have your high reses showing, export, and then again, we can just drop this right on our desktop here as, you know, leg high. What you name this doesn't really matter. It's just going to export a FBX file with a bunch of subtools in it. If you have multiple subtools, they'll all export as one FBX. We can save that one, and then I can't move this here, but let me show you. Yes, let me move this up here. So you'll see something like this: visible, smooth normal. Visible and smooth normals is the most important thing you need to know. And then if you say okay, that's going to go through and say, okay, I'll export your high res at 271,000. Boom. It exported visible, which is just our high. And then you can go through here, turn on the visibility for all your low, say export, and then name it leg underscore low or whatever you want to name it. And then that will do the exact same thing. All your low res visibility subtools will be exported. So now you have a high FBX and a low FBX. Drag your low into Substance, do a file, new, grab your low res FBX. That'll load up your low res FBX, and then you can go into texture, bake maps. Again, I think I go through a lot of that in this one here. Armor, clothing, and accessories. Baking those off is where I think I did a lot of that. Yeah, that's basically it. Wish I could. That's kind of it's not a super involved topic, but to actually go through and demo, I would have to go outside of ZBrush, and this is a ZBrush centric live stream, so I don't want to do that. But yeah, that's basically how it works. Maybe that's, you know, I'm gonna have to. That's another thing I'm gonna have to do is make just a really concise video about, hey, here's multiple high, here's multiple low, here's a couple that you want to bake to one, and then just walk through it. It's not that. Once you do it a couple times, it gets easier. Good to see you. Yeah, thank you, Hawkwinter. Just wanted to say thank you. Oh, absolutely. Those are fun to make. Hopefully they're helping out. Always glad when my videos help. Patrick 4D, how's it going? Everything is good with me. A little tired. What's today? Tuesday? Well, my birthday's coming up, July 4th. Born on the 4th of July. So that's exciting. I'll be turning 22, let's say. Now I'm somewhere in my 40s. I forget exactly what age I am, but 40 something. speaking of Patrick 4D, Google Patrick 4D, go on his Instagram, check out, or even here on ZBrush live streaming, he does awesome food sculpts and renders. I'm always blown away by the fidelity he gets out of that stuff. That's one thing too, where, let me see if I have an example. I'll do, I got some foods. I got a little garbage pail food stuff here. But if you want to see the real Food Master, go check out Patrick 4D's stuff. I have a garbage pail waffle, but that's about it. Let's see. Did you try? I haven't tried ZBrush for iPad, but I've seen some cool stuff with that. I'll have to. I'm not a big Apple guy. I think I had an Apple iPhone. I mean, I started out with an iPhone, obviously. And then I was like, oh, great, I have storage. Let me put some, I'm a man about town. I need to put some files on my iPhone because at the time it was probably 8 gig of storage, which looking at Apple products, that's probably the same storage they have. Their storage options are pretty lackluster, I guess you could call it. Not a lot of options there. But basically, I was like, okay, great, I can put my files on there. And of course, Apple, being the exclusive lockdown gated community that it is, was like, oh no, you can't. Everything has to go through iTunes, and if we don't recognize it, and we can't, I don't know. iTunes and Apple sucks. That's part of it that sucks. Now, I don't think that that's a deal anymore, and I think it's probably a lot easier to use. But honestly, ever since then, I've been flagship Android, Samsung Galaxy, haven't looked back. So eventually I'll probably get an iPad and probably have ZBrush on the couch while I watch TV and probably sculpt an awesome foot and leg in ZBrush. That day is not today. But eventually, probably. I don't know that I'll do a whole bunch of really crazy dev work. I don't know. Even when the iPad came out, I was like, well, I'll just use my laptop. And then, of course, iPad became the biggest thing in the world. So ZBrush on the iPad may become the biggest thing in the world. I wouldn't be the one to call that. Workflow for exporting polypaint data from ZBrush to Substance Painter. Yeah, well, basically what we just talked about was, yeah, absolutely. Export this as your high res, export this as your low res, and then in Painter, literally just bring in your low res as your file new, texture sets bake textures, load in your high res FBX, say bake, you're done. It won't convert it. It'll basically pixel ray transfer the high res data to the low res texture map. But let's see. Why are alphas called alphas? Why not something not confusing like height stamps? My coworker asked me this. I wondered as well. Alphas are more common known as sort translucency. That's a good question. Alpha. I guess because even an alpha map. Let's go back here to leg high. So alpha talk. Let's go ahead and turn off colorize here. So I want to use alphas to do stuff on here. Technically, if I go through here and I'm like, okay, let's make a skin brush. I'm going to go in here to standard brush. I don't want to mess up my standard brush. Standard brush is just kind of nice. Let's turn off RGB, turn on Z-Add. So we're sculpting with our standard brush here. And if we want a nice smooth stroke, remember underneath stroke lazy mouse, you can tap L to turn lazy mouse on and off. So if you have lazy mouse on and you also have a lazy radius, if you want a really smooth stroke, crank that up, get a nice smooth stroke. Or you can go in here and, I think by default it's set to 1. So it's not a super smooth stroke, but it's kind of a smooth stroke here. But then you can't do dots. You kind of can, but just tap L on your keyboard and then that'll turn lazy mouse off. And then you can turn L back on and then you'll get a little smooth stroke. So I don't know why I brought that up. It was in my head. So what's the question? Oh, alphas. So I want to make a skin brush. So instead of messing with my standard brush, I'm going to go in here to standard brush, hit clone. And then we'll go in here to like a spray stroke, and we'll go in here and we'll do alpha, let's do like alpha 23. So now if I go through here and I can just spray stroke some skin detail. There we go. He's got a nice fungal infection. Or you can go down here to like Z intensity, drop that way down, and now you have just you can hold down Alt and punch it in, and then let go of Alt and punch it out. And now we have kind of a nice, this is just noise, but let's call it skin texture. So technically it is an alpha. And it is using transparency. Wherever it's black, it's transparent, and wherever it's white, it's not. And I guess that must be where it comes from. right? Because it's the alpha is treating it as a height stamp in the brush case. So if we want to go through here and say, you know what, I want to drag rect, I'm going to switch this over to an arrow, and then we can use, oh, Z add intensity up. And then, so here's the other thing too. You can see how it kind of softens at the edges here. That's that fallout, that focal shift right here. Tap S. So to change my brush size, I tap S on here. You can also do that right click, oops, preferences. Remember when we were navigating, we turned off enable right click pop up. You can also right click in here and change your focal shift right here, or you can go in here and change your focal shift. So now, if this focal shift is, that little middle section is small and the outside section is large, that basically is telling it the inside section have it 100% and the outside section have it 0%, and then interpolate, or there's a gradient between the middle and the outside. If you want to do the opposite, take that focal shift to -100, and that'll put the 100% out there at the edges, and now everything you drag is 100%, if that makes sense. You could also do, speaking of alphas, you can go in here and you can say modify, and you could turn on like radial fade somewhere in here. There it is. You can go in here and you can actually bake in a radial fade if you wanted to. It's up to you. But anyway, so technically, in this case, we are using this as a height stamp. However, in masking, so if I hold down Control and we go in here to say mask pin, and then switch it from freehand to drag rect, and then alpha arrow. In this case, oh, and also when you hold down Control, that's a modifier. So we're going from the standard brush that we changed our focal shift on to our mask pin, which the mask has a focal shift at 0. So when I do this, you'll see it kind of fades at the edges. Just remember Control, drag, just hold down Control and then change your focal shift. That'll change it for your mask brush. So now when I drag this out, now this is behaving more like an alpha, right? Also what you can do, just in case, if we hit W on our keyboard, go up here where it says Gizmo 3D, turn that off. That'll turn it into a transpose line. And then if you hold down Control, oh, yeah, I forgot. There is a smart transpose math thing you do. Let's ignore that for now. Let's hit Y. Hold down Control. We got mask pin. Instead of dragging out here on the object, if you want it to be all the same size, you can change this to drag dot, and you can go through here and it'll make it your brush size. If you want to be like, I want an arrow here and here and here and here and here. Oops, that's a feature I'll tell you about in just a second. So now this one is treating it more like an alpha. It's a transparent stamp that kind of puts a mask where it's not transparent. Also, if you're using like spotlight with alphas or like surface noise with alphas, I don't know. Long story short, I think it's because it does use the transparency with alphas, and you can use it as a not height stamp. You can use it as a mask, and then you can go in here and say, inflate to get your height, and you're just using the alpha-ness of the alpha, the transparency of the alpha to get your alpha. I think that must be why, right? I'm just guessing though. Yeah. So that I'm assuming that might be why. Let's see. So about right click navigation, alt right click, and click tap, not hover, works like alt right mouse, left mouse on a mouse. Oh, okay. Let's try that. Alt. Oh, so it turns into this little pan icon. But if I do, let's see, I got right click navigation. Let's turn that off. Alt right click tap. I don't get that little scroll pop up. I just get the ability to sculpt, which honestly, now that I know that, but then it does kind of do a weird lock thing. Yeah, I don't know. I might actually use that to my advantage at some point. That seems neat. Have you tried SDF modeling? SDF. Non-destructive surface modeling in Blender. I haven't. Houdini SDF modeling. I have not. I've done some CAD modeling. I've done some poly modeling. Let's see. primitives. No, I don't think I have. Assign distance fields. Online capabilities. Looks interesting. Yeah, no, I have not. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, dang it. Sorry about that. Question about CC4 4.2. I have a window with information that my maps, diffuse, and normals are missing. If that does happen, normally you can, well, I've never seen that, but I'm assuming you probably just go in there. Again, I can't load it up here, but I would assume you just go into the, have the object selected in your scene and then manually go in and plug in your maps. But the only time I've had some weird stuff happen is when I'm like doing the painter bridge and automatically loading on my textures. Sometimes it'll have a conflict, but then I'll just go and manually plug it in. But I should have a better answer for that. But I don't know that I've seen a window with information that maps and diffuse normals are missing. Or if they are missing, like they got deleted off your computer and I can't find them, that's different. But I'm not sure. How to make anime spiky hair? Well, I might have something for you. It's been a while, but hey, Dragon Ball Z hair creation. This is 6 years old, so I do have this. However, I think new stuff has come out since then. So if you hit the comma key, we go in here to demo anime head. How I would do it now, I think, we have an object that's just Dynamesh, right? So BE is probably my go-to extrude profile. And then you have a bunch of geometry in here. And in fact, anytime you see like, oh, extrude profile, what's that all about? I probably, if it's after 4R8, I probably do have an, there we go. Hey, and look, there's a little hair. So extrude profile brushes for hair, wires, deco frames, etc. You can use basically how to create your own. This is probably something I would have to watch again. I don't do this a ton, so I'd have to go through here and be like, okay, there's extrude alpha. How do I make my own brush? I think probably just brush from mesh. Let's try it. I'm just going to guess. So we have an object here. Now, if you do extrude profile, it's going to want to act like hair. Also, you're going to see it's floating. Like, why is it doing that? Remember, we stored points in history, so that's a feature. For example, if you want to take this head and you want to say, do a let's do it here where you know where it is. If you want to say do a deformation, well, first let's do this. Let's hold down Control and tap this point in history, Control tap again. That'll get rid of any stored history we might have. The default behavior of this brush is I'm going to stick to the object and I'm going to act like hair. I'm going to give myself a little planted point and then allow the user to kind of brush down. So if I just kind of brush straight down, it's going to go, oh, I'm going to plant first, like a hair follicle, and then I'm going to curve down. If you don't want it, if you just want it to follow the surface, go in here, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. Bear with me. Stroke. Underneath curve, we have a repel strength. So if I turn repel strength down to 0 and then drag, now instead of planting and then going down, it's just going to drag this along the surface of the object. Yes. So this is extrude profile. Now, if you want to change that profile, again, you want to do spiky hair with a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of personality. Let's grab like this one here. So if we have an active curve. If we just tap, that'll update this curve to that new alpha profile. So again, if we just drag this out like so, and you look at the back of this, let's go ahead and tap off here, and I'm going to do a split. You know what? We'll do a hide point. That's under visibility, your visibility menu. If we look at the back here, this plane right here is what's being generated, and then ZBrush is telling it, take that shape and then just extrude it along that curved path. You're also going to see it's spiky. So in your case, that's a pretty good deal. Control Shift that to bring everything else back. So in your case, you want to do spiky hair that sticks straight out. All I would do is say, you could probably leave repel strength at 1, and then you could also say as line. and leave your curve fall off as it is, and then you can just go through here and just drag out and then tap to get rid of that curve, and then drag out another one, tap to get rid of that curve. If you want to make it bigger, just make your draw size, your draw size bigger, and then whoop, drag it out, then drag it out, and then drag it out, and drag it out, drag it out, and then tap off. So there we've got some spiky hair. I'm going to Control Shift tap the head, and then we'll do a split hidden, and then now you've got your hair on separate subtools. Now, just like when we were messing around with toes earlier, you could go through here and you can have topology turned on here, topological turned on. So now you can just mess around with one of these. So if you want to go through here and this hair's going through this one, let's move this around, and you can very quickly, even though they're part of the same subtool, move these things around, or you can split them off into their own subtool or a mixture of the two, or you can also merge them back down. There is an alternative. You can go in here to what is it? BCA. BC5 is brush curve alpha. So instead of using, let's do it. BC brush curve alpha. Instead of using geometry that controls the profile, you just have alpha. So you can just swap out an image, for example, this, and then you can go through here. And now if we say, let's do a quick split mask point so we can see it. If we look back here, it's like, oh, that's the arrow. The only downside to this one is the geometry is just this, right? So if you wanted nice clean arrow geometry, what I would do is say BE extrude profile just to bring that brush up. We'll go out of edit mode, switch, Control N. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's go in here to plane, edit, make polymesh 3D. Let's hit Control D a couple times. Let's go in here to, speaking of alphas earlier, we still have this drag dot. Let's set this drag rectangle. I'm going to drag this here. Hit Control W, Control Shift tap, geometry modify topology. Well, delete lower, geometry modify topology, delete hidden, polish deformation, polish by feature, open circle. Just tap that a couple times. ZRemesh half, adapt the size down to 0, and then we can just get controllable arrow geometry, just hitting half and half and half. Now you're gonna notice, oh, these corners are kind of soft. All you got to do, go in here. I like to use my move brush with AccuCurve turned on. That allows you to kind of pull to corners a little bit. So we can go through here and it's like, hey, I want these corners to be sharp. All you got to do is, make this sharp. Let's make this a little sharper here. And then now when we hit ZRemesh half, it's going to build in that sharpness. So now we have a little more controllable geometry in here. So now BE extrude profile. Here's all our brushes here. I think if I go in here to create, brush from mesh, I'm going to hit that button. That's going to put it at the end here. Of course, you probably want to name it, right? So with this one selected, we could say, and delete that mesh. And then here we'll say, rename arrow. And then we'll say from mesh. There we go. So now we just appended this mesh here. So now if I go back to my head here, we have a custom shape. So, and it's still set to as line. So if I go through here and I say, split mask points here, and we look here, instead of having like just generic alpha geometry, it has the exact geometry that we had, and it's also extruding that shape along a profile path. Now, if you didn't want to go super wide to super thin, that's when you can go in here again with this brush selected, and you can play around with, underneath the stroke options, this curve fall off. So it's like, hey, you know what? I wanted to go from thin to thick to thin again. That's when you can go through here and just kind of go through here. Oh, and we can also turn off as line. And if you don't want it to kind of plant itself or root itself, remember you can just turn this repel strength down to 0. And now when I drag this out, we can go through here. We can kind of twist this around. We can hold down, if we start manipulating this object and hold down shift, we can even smooth out the curve. We could even, if we are hovering over this and we hold down control, we can twist along the curve. All sorts of cool things you can do. So if we tap off of here, and again, I'm going to do a quick split mask points. That's under your subtool split menu. Now we're going thin to thick to thin. It's taking that arrow geometry that we made and extruding it along a path. And there you go. Boy, this is looking good. Another alternative, if you want control, I have a custom insert mesh menu that I can actually give you. Let me see if I can find it. Google Drive. IMM base primitives. I think this is the right one. Share, copy link. Done. So this, if I'm gonna paste this here. If you load up that brush, that's gonna give you these shapes here, and in here there's a one called bend curve. So if I'm gonna turn off X symmetry because we're doing hair. Hair is rarely symmetrical. So I'm gonna go ahead and just drag this out here, and you're going to see it just drags out a cylinder with divisions along it. So what I like to do is say split mass points. If I hit W, it put that right down the length of this. If for some reason, you know, your gizmo gets askew, just hold down Alt and tap on the end here. You can even hold down, you can even go here to that little teardrop icon, put it right in the middle. And now again, that Z axis is straight down here. So now I can go in here to the gear icon. Oops. There we get it, go, come on, one more, there we go. Bend curve. So now the gizmo determines the axis that it's on, and of course we straighten that out when we alt tapped, and then we can go through here, we can change the curve resolution with the orange arrow. So what I usually do is I'll start low, so I'll be okay, I want this to be embedded, and I want this to kind of curve out, and I want this to kind of flip up. That's the primary direction of the hair follicle I want, right? And in fact, maybe on this one I want to twist a little bit, and then maybe over here I want to squeeze it or scale it. So now we can kind of get a little taper. I can also go in here and, you know, let's take the this cone, this resolution, we'll add. So we've got our primary form in there and our primary twist, and now I'm going to go in here and finesse it a little bit. It's like, you know what? Let's kind of flip this up and kind of flip this over a little bit and kind of move this around and, you know, whatever. So now we've got some secondary corkscrewing or whatever, and now we have a hair. Now you don't have to use, so again, going back to this menu, you don't have to use a cylinder. You can have a flat, you can have a, you know, extrude that arrow, for example. Let's just do it. We'll go in here to our Z modeler brush, hover over a face, Q mesh, polygroup all, we'll just pull that out. We'll give it some insert, multiple edge loops. And then we'll do a quick group by normal. So now let's say this is my hair that I want to have on my object here. So I'm going to say, you know, we can actually look on one end, say B, create insert mesh, new, go back to our head here. I can drag this hair out. I'm going to say, again, split mass points, hit W, go in here to the gear icon, say bend curve. We'll start low. So, you know, here's my planted base. Here's my hair curve. I want it to taper on this end, so we're going to go and scale it. Maybe I want to fatten this one, you know, so it kind of goes whoop. Oh, and again, maybe I want to twist. So maybe I want to just, you know, have this kind of twist as it goes along, kind of helix along its path. And then I want to add a little more resolution. So I'll go back here to this cone, add one more, get a little more finesse here, maybe a little more wiggle interest. And then maybe, you know, maybe I want a little more. So go in here and add a little more resolution. So then you just go in here and finesse this as much as you want. When you're done, hit W, and then now you have, I mean, this one isn't great. And also the other thing too is it only has as many spans as you start with. So if you want to have more spans, just to have your original model have more spans. Of course, you can also just hit Control D to subdivide, and that'll start smoothing this out. And then you can go in here with your Damien standard brush. Another good one is like hit the comma key, go in here to brush, and I'm going to /2. Go through here and you can kind of use this to kind of sculpt in some hair. Make sure that your tap L to go into your lazy radius if you want to smooth your stroke out a little bit. In fact, this alpha right here, if we go in here to cylinder, make polymesh 3D. So here's the default /alpha. To change this, it's kind of a little bit different. Let's go in here to the alpha menu. There is, in this case, under modify, there's an alpha adjust. This line is controlling that sharpness. So if you want to fade or blur that out a little bit, just move this one over. Move this one over. That'll kind of blur that line. And then you'll get a little bit of a softer, won't be quite as harsh. So anyway, /2. It's kind of a fun one for hair or other things, I suppose. What else could you do? There's a million different ways. And also this is more like I insert multi-mesh hair creation. There's all sorts of, like, you can sculpt and then you can, you know, build geometry off of your sculpt. All sorts of ways. Let's say delete other. There we go. Sorry, it's kind of a long-winded. Can I sculpt a hand? Yeah, it would basically be the same method that I did. Number one, grab some awesome reference. And number two, set up, just like we did with the foot at the very beginning of this video, set up your primary palm, go through, and hands are kind of tedious to demo just because it's like, okay, here's, and then you can sculpt one finger and then duplicate it, and then, you know, modify that and then look at your reference and get it all in. I can do a really quick version where it's like cube, make polymesh 3D. Here's my palm here. Oops. And then we'll say, you know what, we'll just dynamesh this. And then if we want to fatten this out, we'll say inflate. There we go. There's our basic palm shape. And then off of here, I'm going to go into my menu here, cylinder. Here's a thumb. And again, depending on how granular you want to get, like, because you could do like, okay, here's the first part of my thumb, and then here's the second part of my thumb, and it's going to have, and here's the third part of my thumb. You could do this for every finger if you wanted to, you know, whatever your heart desires. But basically, I would say split hidden, and then Dynamesh is already turned on for this, so boom, there's my thumb. And then if I go through here and be like, okay, here's the base of my thumb, and then the tip of my thumb, and then thumbs tend to, or fingers tend to be kind of flatter on the back with a little bit of, you know, just kind of look at it. Here's kind of a little bit of a knuckle, but it's basically flat. And then on the inside, it's a little more curvy, a little more bubbly, and that goes for every finger. Now, I probably can't use this. If I control drag off, I can just drag off a copy. It would be kind of cool to make a creature or a humanoid-ish creature that's all thumbs. That would be kind of a fun one. But in this case, what we'd probably want to do is be like, okay, now we need to make an actual finger. So we'll say, okay, this is the finger here. And of course, you know, looking at your reference or whatever, you've got a knuckle like this, and then you've got a knuckle like this, and then you've got a little bit of a flatter knuckle, and then this kind of tapers a little bit, and then on the from the side profile view, it is going to be flatter on the top, and then on the bottom here you're going to have a little bit of divot in, and then this one's going to have a little divot in, and then this one's going to have a little divot in, a little bubblier on the bottom. There you go, basic finger, right? And then same thing we did on the foot. Here's our middle finger, here's our ring finger, and again we're scale. And also one thing to consider is when you're doing a hand, it's not like your hand isn't like a T-pose flat plane, right? You're gonna have the middle finger's gonna go up. You know, look at the natural curves of the human form. You have, you know, whatever, this and this and this. I learned something interesting about the number of fingers in Japanese cartoons that can be problematic sometimes. I learned that last night. But we're going to say auto groups, and then W, control tap this one, and then control drag out another one. This is going to be your pinky. So now you could do a uniform scale. You could do a non-uniform scale. You could do, hold down Alt, and you could scale the thinness along 2 axes. You know, so, you know, for the pinky, it's probably more of a uniform scale, right? And now I am spacing these quite a bit apart because at the end of the day, you know what we're going to do. We're going to merge all these down. We have polygroups built in. We're going to hit W. We're going to say remesh by union. We have polygroups built in. ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0, keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. And now we have our building blocks for our hands set up. Decent geometry. We don't have any real detail to, you know, get back, so I don't need to worry about like control tabbing up here and projecting back. There we go. We got a basic quick hand, and now we can hit Control D to subdivide, and we got something we can kind of work with to kind of go through and sculpt your hand in earnest, if that makes sense. I use a space mouse sometimes. I don't have one set up on this computer. I have one set up on my other computer. I think I haven't. Did I? I feel like I did. Did I? Am I crazy? Yes. Oops. Yeah, space mouse. There you go. If you're into space mice, There's me using a space mouse. Question. Do you have count number of characters you made in your career? Interestingly enough, I don't think I don't have a professional one. I don't. What I do have is I started because I'm always because I can always go back and like pick up old projects and I always forget what I've done. So I do have a Miro board where I went through. Now this isn't all my professional stuff where it's like, oh, what did you do on Hogwarts Legacy? It's not in here. Because I'm probably not going to go back and use it. I do have some old DC Universe Online stuff, like when I went back and redid my Mixelplix character for fun. I don't know. Some of these, like Plastic Man, might be kind of fun to go back and revisit. I'd love to go and do a real version of my Metallo someday. These take me back. Yeah, so that's DCO. I think is my only professional stuff. Some Anki Overdrive stuff, Legends of Norath. There's a couple Halo things in here from way back when, old E3D stuff. But for my live streams that I've done, I just try to keep track of like, okay, and I don't even have my Walton Goggins or my, just in case. If you go here, yeah, my Ultramarine isn't in there. The Walton Goggins and the Fallout Ghoul that we made in my other last two live streams. Those aren't in here, but you get the idea. Yeah. This little cool dude. Old Cyber Demon fan art. Huh. Well, now I want to go. Oh, I never finished out this Pickle Rick. Anyway, no, I have no idea how many characters I made in my career. I could probably get a pretty close number if I sat down and got a pencil and paper out and really thought about it, but several dozen. How do you make it so the mask stays on one side and not both? So I think what you're referring to is like if I go through here and I want to mask an arrow on the back of his hand. Let's say Control D a couple times. So, so another thing too, if you want to hold down Control and drag this out and then use Spacebar to move this into place, you can. However, goes all the way through my object, right? You can rectify that. Just hold down Control, go in here to Mask Lasso and say, unmask the other side and you're good to go. Unfortunately, that's just a feature of ZBrush. If you have a mask, it's always going to mask through the entire object. The only way to rectify that is if you wanted to, for example, maybe go in here and say, hit Control W. So now I have a polygroup on the back and it's like, okay, I want to drag an arrow out on the back of his hand. Isolate that part of the hand. Whoop. Switch back here. Put that arrow on there and you're going to see there's no geometry for it to mask to. So Control Shift Tab to bring everything else back and you're good to go. So if you have a polygroup set up to where, for example, arrow and then Control Shift Tap and then Control Shift Tap and then arrow, Control Shift Tap. You can have two different masks on either side just because you're using geometry visibility. But now having said that, now that's if you're just masking all the way through an object. Now what can happen is if we have like say a cube here, here's a little trick I like to use. Make Polymesh 3D, hit W. You can see this geometry, not ideal for sculpting, right? Really easy to fix. ZRemesher, half, detect edges. Boom. Perfect. And now I can hit Control D all day long with nice even geometry for sculpting. Now, I hit Control D a bunch of times. We have, we can go in here and sculpt detail, right? Now it's going through my object. If I don't want it to, for example, for my standard brush, if you go in here to Brush, Auto Masking, there is a backface mask. So for instance, for my standard brush, if I turn that on, now when I use my standard brush, it doesn't go through the object. Same thing for masking. If I hold down Control and I say mask, let's turn this off and switch back to dot stroke. I have mask pin and we'll focal shift to 0. If you're ever like, oh, what happened to this brush? You can also go in here to Brush and then say Reset Current, and that'll reset your mask pin. If you're holding down Control when you do it, that'll reset that. Same thing for standard brush. You can either reset all your brushes if you want, or just reset current. And now you're back to your starting. So if I hold down Control and mask pin, it's going to mask through my object. However, And you may be looking and you may be like, okay, for my standard brush, I turn on backface masking. Great, my standard brush doesn't go through. I'm golden. Don't be confused, because as soon as I hold down Control, that backface mask goes away. This is brush dependent. So if I go in over here to my, clay tubes brush, backface masking is off. So it's going to suck through. And this is where it gets nasty when you go in here and you like Dynamesh something. And you're sculpting along and you're like, oh, I'm such an awesome sculptor. And you Dynamesh and you're like, oh man. This is where backface masking comes in handy. So again, clay tubes have backface masking turned on. You're going to see I have a hotkey set to backface. So that way I can go through all my brushes, trim dynamic, Alt F, standard brush, Alt F, clay brush, Alt F, clay tubes, Alt F, hold down Control. This one, I have to go in here and turn on backface masking. But the reason I have this in my interface is, number one, I can look over here and see it. So if I turn on Move Brush, you can see backface masking is off. So I can go through here and use it as normal. However, if I turn backface masking on using my hotkey, didn't need to go and look for it, didn't need to press anything, I have a little visual indicator that backface masking is on. So now if I want to thicken this object up, if I have Move with backface masking on, if I just pull in this direction, it'll just thicken. Now if I pull in the other direction, it's going to thicken in that direction and leave this side alone. So this is a really easy way to be like, I want to thicken this side up, pull this up here, maybe pull this down here. Really easy way to thicken objects up. And then I hit my hotkey to turn it off, and now it's going to behave like a normal mask brush. Control Shift, or let's go in here and Dynamesh that. There we go. So, and then also masking. Control, mask an object. It's not going through to the other side. Sculpting on an object. If backface masking is on, it's not going through to the other side, etc., etc. Sometimes, though, you do want it to. So that's when I go in here to Alt F, make sure backface masking is off. So if I'm doing a cape, I want to go through here. I want it to affect both sides. I want it to kind of, do this. This is another thing we could talk about, is thickness on clothing, because that can sometimes be tricky. But oh, did they do that in Spy Kids? I don't know that I've seen them, but that seems like something they might do. All thumbs. Let's see. Do you know of a way to transfer a subtool's undo history into another subtool, or duplicate the subtool and have both versions? Oh, with full undo history. No. And in fact, undo history, if you're using undo history is a thing where it's like, hey, just like when we were like, what's a good example? So we'll go back to this hand here. So here's just trying to get some detail on here. We need to project back. So for example, undo history. So this is undo history. So you can actually like record a movie and it'll like rotate around while you're doing this. That's just under your movie menu. Boy, it's been a long time since I've done this, but like somewhere in here is a way for you to play your, there we go, forward history, record backward history. It'll go through your undo history and like, just kind of play it back as it rotates around with your brush strokes. So it's kind of like a little floaty thing that's just popping into existence. But as far as like transferring history, usually what I do with history is I'll have one arbitrary mesh that I can Control Tap to store those points in history. And then I can have, like, if I clone this off, here I am in a completely different subtool. This is or hell, I don't even have to clone it off. It's like, hey, I'm going to store these points in history. Let's say, in fact, let's do this. Let's say let's drag from our Dynamesh resolution slider here. So this is a completely just Dynamesh object, right? And I want to make a new version of this. So I'm going to Control Tap these points in history. I'm going to ZRemesh this down to 5,000. We're not going to keep groups. We'll just ZRemesh this. So completely wiping out our Dynamesh, completely changing the topology of this object, but I got those history points stored. So now I can hit Control D and then do our whole project history we were doing earlier. So under your subtool menu, there is a project history. It's at the bottom of mine. Control D, project history, Control D to subdivide, and then project history. So that's one way. You could also use this to store a morph. This actually stores morph data as well. That's more useful than my CC4 workflow, but This is how I would transfer a history point or a history state to another subtool, is just control tapping and then projecting detail back. But as far as like taking all of these undo histories and applying it to another object, I don't know that that's possible. And honestly, I don't do a ton of, I don't save any undo history. I like having points stored, but I don't do a ton of like history recording or needing access to old undo histories, if that makes sense. Let me see. Oh, but I do understand what you're saying, where it's like, hey, I have history on here, and then if I go through here and I'm like, you know what, I want to duplicate this off. As soon as I duplicate, it gets rid of this. I do use this to, when do I do that to my advantage? There are some instances where I'll duplicate something off just to kind of have, you know, I'm going to have a working state of this one, and then I'll go back to my original and be like, actually, I'm going to go back to, damn, did I kill that history? Then I'll go back to an earlier state on my other subtool that had all the pieces or something. Oh, it's this one. Yeah. So this is what I would do. This one's got a ton of undo history on it, right? Well, I'm going to duplicate this off. This one doesn't have great undo. This one, it killed my undo history, right? Well, I still have a duplicate over here where I'm like, you know what? On this duplicate, I want to go back to where I had just my subtools here. That's where I might be like, here's one version of this, and then here's the other version at a different state. I can roll back my undo history, say, okay. So now I've got two separate subtools, one with no history, but with the date, this vertices where I want them. And then I've got this one that has undo history that I can go through, and I can grab, you know, another point, any point along that undo history path. I don't have a great answer for that one. Sorry. I cannot create a new topic or cannot post on ZBrush Central. Weird. Is there an admin you can contact? Honestly, I don't. Yeah, someone else might have an answer to that one. I don't. Sorry about that. I am doing good. How are you doing? Live feedback on community models sometimes. You know what? That's another good one. God, am I on Discord still? I must be, right? I think I have a Discord channel. Oh, I always forget. Oh no, I have so many messages. Yeah, I have a Discord channel. What's the best way I could do this? I wonder, I'd probably do it on YouTube. Discord's tough. So what I might do in the, like my next live stream or a future live stream, I might go onto YouTube and do, well, you guys won't see it because it'll be on, if I stream on Pixelytic's channel. If I stream on my own channel, I might post an update in here and be like, hey, post me a link to your Google Drive of a project you're working on, and I'll go through and show up at this time. I'll download the object and I'll, you know, answer your questions on what you're working on. I've done that a little bit in the past. It's just hard to get that stuff. I could also, when I'm live streaming here, I could put in the description like, hey, live QA, post, if I don't know, can you guys even post links on here to Google Drive or whatever? I could download your models. I think Thomas Whittlebach does that. I could follow his lead and like grab your, because that's actually a lot more fun than working on my own crappy stuff, is to work on your guys' awesome stuff. It's a little bit funner. Yeah, let's figure that out. How do I do that? Let me know. If I wanted to sculpt a bust using a Character Creator 4 base mesh, how do I do that? So, well, a bust is a little trickier. If we go in here to videos, if you just want to use, if you don't want to download, you can use here's the free character base meshes. If you do want to do something a little fancier where it's like you have a piece of the object, this is where, let me see. An example of that, there's two examples. One of that is like this here. So all of this whole so if we go here, here's all the live streams on how we made basically. But this whole body here, the only part of this that is part of the Character Creator base mesh that's visible is the head. Now, if you're talking about I want to sculpt a bust and have no verts, like I don't want to use a transparency map or an alpha map, or an opacity map, I should say. That's a lot trickier. If you just want to hide parts of your mesh, this is totally doable. So just the face here that's visible is, and also this little meat section around here is, that's part of, I think I have it. Yeah, this is the only thing that's weighted in there, and this is all sculpted in ZBrush and stuff. That's the only thing that's visible. The other one too, and I used ZBrush a lot for this, is this one. So photogrammetry, the only part that's weighted and visible is this little head portion right in here. So we basically use that topology so we can get access to the facial blend shapes. Quick and easy facial animation basically is the name of the game here. Using ZBrush to transfer data and sculpt details and process a photogrammetry and, you know, paint through, history project with RGB turned on. It's all in there. And then I can go through these fast forward. So now we have a bust, sculpted bust, arbitrary geometry, and this is kind of a tricky way to use CC topology in a way that's, oh, you know what? I didn't make a live stream of this, did I? Because I just kind of did that for fun. I do have one that walks through the process. It is called, oh, there it is, Julius Caesar statue. We actually do walk through the entire process of setting this up, and using just portions of that mesh, like the bust part of the mesh to go through. And I think did I end up animating this? Ooh, yeah, and I turned him into a real human at the end. Nice. And you can also use, yeah, there you go. So now you can go through there and use like portions of a mesh to animate with. Anyway, yeah, those research to get you rolling. When I make a loop with curve brush to make belts, for example, I make so many belts. I want to adjust the positions up and down, but instead the belt's angle rotates from the curve. How do I prevent that from happening? Okay, so let's talk about belts. That's a good one. Let's clean this out. Delete all. Delete all. Delete all. So I'm going to tell you how I make belts, and then I'll try to answer your question, because I don't use curve paths for belts, which is limiting, don't get me wrong, but let me see if this helps anybody. Let's go in here, mail ZPR, hit your comma key to go in a lightbox and load up. You know what? Whenever you load up a new project, it deletes everything in here, so I guess I didn't need to do that. But anyway, I want to put a belt on this guy. Now, if I want to keep this geometry, he has subdivision history. So if I want to keep that, I can say, you know what, let's duplicate this off. I have solo turned on. Your solo might be down here somewhere, but turn solo on. So we're just looking at this one here. I'm going to go in here and we're going to say delete lower. And I want to put a belt on this guy. Control Shift, go in here to slice curve. Hold down spacebar, turn on brush radius, and then you can just slice through your object. And it'll slice through at your brush radius. So we'll turn this a little bit smaller. There we go. There's our brush slice through. Control Shift Tap, Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden. Polygroups, auto groups, grab that middle piece here, delete hidden. I'll turn off perspective. So now for a belt, I'm going to say ZRemesh half, tap size down to 0. And now we've got, oh, we also have X symmetry turned on. So that's why it snapped to symmetrical, but that's fine. So here is the beginnings of our belt. Now it's built in. Let's do another ZRemesh half. You can see it's kind of like stuck to his body. So what I tend to do is go in here to polish by feature, open circle, and just tap that a couple times, and then ZRemesh half. That'll kind of smooth it out. And then I just keep hitting half, half, half until I get down to something like this. So this is the beginnings of my belt. Z modeler brush, QMesh polygroup all, and we'll pull out a little thickness. Now, if I want to have where the kind of, you know, this part of the belt goes out and this part of the belt goes in, tap X to go out of X symmetry. The part of the belt that goes out, I'm going to hold down Alt and just paint that. And then I'm going to say QMesh polygroup all, start QMeshing this out and hold down Control. You know, let's do this. Control, and then tap Alt to get a new polygroup here. And then I'm going to pull this thickness out. So now I'm going to say, and in fact, yeah, I'll show you both ways. You could work on just a one single-sided mesh, so it's just basically working, oof. There you go. You could work like this and just work on this and then add thickness later, or you can keep this thickness, and I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways you could do this, but one way you could is I'm going to go through here. I'm going to say polyloop here, and let's make that more obvious. There we go. So I'm going to get rid of this strip right here, delete hidden. I'm going to go on the side here. We're going to say delete. So now I'm going to say bridge, 2 holes, U to U. I'll get rid of this one here. So now I have a belt that goes on the outside and then a belt that goes on the inside. If I want to, you know what, I deleted that and I didn't need to. Let's do this. Let's just do a geometry modified topology, close holes. And then I can very quickly go in here and say delete edge, U, U, U. Now, here's a cool thing. If I want to hold down Control and Alt, I can grab these polygons here. I can hit W, Alt tap right here, and I can hold down Control and rotate, and I can just go through here and just build in the inside of that belt, right? So now I've got an inside of a belt and an outside of the belt. Polygroups are kind of, they are what they are, right? So I'm going to go through here, do a polygroup group by normals. That'll give me an inside, an outside, and end cap polygroups here. So now I can just go in here to polish by feature. We'll do closed, open circle will polish the hell out of this object. Closed circle will maintain your volumes a little bit better. So whichever one works for you, you can kind of go through there and you can kind of, you know, smooth out that result. So now we've got, you know, a belt kind of going. Let's go in here to ZBrush insert, IMM clothing. We'll grab this buckle. We'll put a big old buckle on here. Something like this. There we go. And nice. Now I'm going to say split mass points. So now we have a belt with a buckle. And now this is where I would go in here and be like, okay, let me mask poly loop. I'm going to go through and mask this one, this one, this one, invert that, W, move this out, and kind of start finagling this geometry. You can even just use your move brush if you wanted to. So get as fancy as you want to go through here and start tucking geometry in and having it interact. And also you can go through here too, and you can say, let's show you what I would really do. So for instance, I want to hold this here. I'm going to go in here and just do like a bevel here, and then maybe a bevel here. And then these interior parts here. Actually, you know what? I'll probably grab all these, right? Again, mask, U, invert, set my normal. And that'll kind of hold, those edges will kind of hold here. And then I'll kind of poof this out a little bit. And then I can go through here. I can even do a transpose, edge loop complete, just kind of transpose this line back. Transpose this line back if I wanted to. You know, just kind of go through there and finagle your geometry. Now, if I go through here and say crease PG, that'll go through and crease all my polygroups. Well, my polygroups, I was using this for masking purposes. So again, I'm going to go through here one more time, group by normals, and then I can go through and do a crease geometry, crease PG. That'll crease all my polygroup borders. I can hit D for dynamic. That'll give me a little dynamic preview. In fact, if I want this to kind of curve down on the corners, let's do Shift D. I can say, you know what, this polygroup right here, I'm going to continue painting down and then tap Shift. I'm going to make these blue polygroups the same as my end caps. So now I'm going to say uncrease all, crease PG. Now when I hit D for dynamic, I'll get a nice curve on those corners. Oops, I didn't do the bottoms. It's probably going to be, here's an easier way to do this. You could do a hover over this edge, polygroup, poly loop. That'll make this entire inside section the same polygroup. Or Control Shift tap with select lasso, and that'll do kind of the same thing. So Control W, polygroup, auto groups, and now you have an inside polygroup, an outside polygroup, and a middle polygroup. Uncrease all, crease PG, D for dynamic, and now you've got kind of a belt going. Now you can see I didn't use curves at all. Now if I did want to use a curve and say like, okay, let's do Shift D. If I did want to go, oh, another thing too while you're in here is, let's say, I'm going to say insert single edge loop. I'm going to hold down Alt and get rid of these, and then say insert multiple edge loops, keep polygroup. I'm going to go through here and do that. I'll say uncrease all, crease PG, and now I can say, just to kind of show you, I'm going to say split point. So we're going to split a point here. Now I want all these split points to be the same, so I'm just going to tap, tap, tap. And then I'm going to go to the back here, which is going to be kind of hard to see. So I'm going to hit W, control drag along here. This is a new feature. If you control drag, see how soft you can actually create a kind of a gradient here, go to BTC, which is Transpose Classic. That'll give you that harsher line. So now I'll go to Visibility, Hide Point, Control Shift Drag, and now I can go through here and be like, okay, split point, split, split, split. Yes, yes, yay. And then, oops, let's go through here, and I'm also going to do a Q mesh, and as I pull through, it's going to automatically, this one got a little bit weird, so instead of doing Q mesh polygroup all, I'm going to say Q mesh polygroup island, and then one by one, I'm going to pull these through, and that'll automatically, is it going to do it? If it's giving you problems, what you can also do is Control Shift Tap. Let's do this, Control Shift Tap here, Geometry Modify Topology Delete Hidden. I'm going to do Display Properties Double, which for y'all, I guess that got a little bit weird. Display Properties Double here so I can see both sides, and then I can just do a quick bridge two holes again. So U to U, hole, there we go. And I'll go through here and we'll say Insert Single Edge Loop, pull down Alt. So a couple different ways. And then again, I'll just go through Group by Normals again. If you're getting too much polygroups here, again, Group by Normals under your polygroup menu, just crank that up, and that'll make that a little bit nicer. Anyway, belts. And also let's take our undo history back, because basically it's like, okay, that's all great, but or maybe it's not. Maybe that's stupid and not going to help you. But you can go through here and you can say, okay, I want a path to put a curve along that's in the shape of this belt. So Control Shift Tap these two rings, Geometry Modify Topology Delete Hidden. I'm going to do an auto groups so I can grab this outside. I forgot. It's connected by these little interior points. So let's get rid of those. These here, Geometry Modify Topology Delete Hidden, auto groups. There we go. Delete Hidden, double. So here we have a path that we can pass a curve around. So I'm going to hover over this one. We're going to say polygroup here. So now we have, let's say uncrease all. So we have a strip of geometry. And this, by the way, if you want to know more options, I think I have a controlling curves. Yeah, controlling curves video that kind of goes through a few more options. But basically, I have a polygroup path. So now I'm going to go in here to stroke. I'm going to turn off everything but polygroups, hit frame mesh. Now I have a curve in here. So if I want to swap this belt out with something like BI brush insert IMM curve, hit M. I think there's like a necklace or a bracelet link in here. Make our draw size whatever size we want. Tap. That'll put this object right down there. If you want it to be embedded like kind of in the middle, just go in here to brush. What was I doing? Depth. You can just move this depth slider down, tap to update. Actually embed of, oops, 0 will probably do the trick. Yeah, right down the middle. So now we're using our geometry path to frame a curve, and now we can just kind of tap this along. So now the actual question was, adjust the positions up and down, but instead of the belt's angle. Okay. Instead of the belt's angle, rotates the curve. Yeah. This is where if you have like snap turned on, you turn that off. Yeah, and it's starting to like rotate. Curves are tricky, man. Like there's cool things about curves. Where I can go through here, like we were talking about earlier. You can hold down Shift and you can kind of, oops, let's make our draw size smaller. You can tap Shift to smooth. You can swap these out. So if you go in here to BI brush insert, hit M, change it to a bracelet, you can update it, or change it to a bike chain, you can update it. That's pretty cool. But also a little bit bigger. Also, smoothing a curve is cool. Holding down Control and rotating and twisting a curve is cool. But it can get really hard to modify, right? So that's why if I am going to do what I just did, so let's go ahead and just delete that out of here. So it's like, okay, I want to put a belt on this, and I want to get pretty close to what I'm doing. I'm going to say duplicate. You can even go in here and say delete. Let's say delete higher, delete lower on subdivision level 2. Control Shift, and instead of slice, I'm going to slice through with brush radius off. That'll give me a polygroup line, and then I can just isolate this here, delete hidden, and then you could just say frame, mesh, brush, curve. What are we doing? BI, brush, insert, curve, M, BI, sorry, here, M, necklace. There we go. Now, we do have X symmetry turned on, so it's going to double up. So tap X to go X symmetry off, and now it'll slide. Basically, you're using the geometry to, so if you want this to go up, just don't frame it yet. Just move this up, or move this down, or smooth this out, or ZRemesh this. Whatever you need to do to put this geometry where you want it, and then when you've got it figured out, then you can frame your mesh. Frame your mesh, go back to your curve, tap it, tap off, split mask points, and now move this, turn off brush, auto masking, turn off topological. Then you can go in here and do minor adjustments just with like move brush or gizmo or whatever. Yeah, that's what I would do. You did notice there's a gap on this one. Some of them will attach back together if it's like a tube. In this case, it has 2 endpoints here. So what I might, if you want to just continue this through, I would go through here and say delete hidden. You could do polygroups, auto groups, W, control tap this one, and then just drag out a copy. Or if you don't want to do that, control shift drag over this piece, control shift A. Actually, there's a new function for that. Control drag over this, and then set a hotkey for mask grow all. Yeah, so that way you can just like mask and then do grow all. It'll just grab this one, control tap to invert that, and then you can just control drag out a copy, control drag out a copy, and then kind of finagle these. It'll take you a few minutes, but you know, just kind of finagle these into place. I don't have a hotkey for that, I don't think. Grow all, there we go. Something like this. Now, another really cool update that was done in ZBrush 2024, and again, if you want to know where that is, easy mode is going here to ZBrush What's New. Hey, 2024 What's New. You can go through here and there's some goodies in there, I guess, but here's all of the, here's all of the things. This is the repeat similar parts video. So since these are all the same vert count, if I wanted to modify one and replace all the other ones, let's see if I remember how to do this, because I don't do it a ton. Let me get out of that page because it's distracted me. Where is it? Geometry. This is one of those ones where I'm like, let me go watch this Michael Pavlovich video because I don't remember how to do it. Repeat the similar parts. Groups. Polygroups will be transferred, colors, masking. That's fine. So now if I go through here and I just like sculpt on one, apply to similar, what is it? Is it masking off? Is it this one? Requires undo history. Oh, that's right. Okay, we'll go latest. So I'm going to store this point in undo history, and then I'm going to sculpt on one, apply similar, just these three. But if I go here, apply similar, identical topology. Let me see. Control tab. Nope. Store these points in history. I'll have to go back and watch my video. There are ways you could either update one mesh and it'll update all of them, and or you could even swap these meshes out. I swear it's possible. Again, playlists, go to ZBrush 2024 What's New, and this video right here, repeat the similar parts. Anyway, again, if you want these resources, I'll copy these again. ArtStation and YouTube. Use your search function. I have to. Any idea about it? Open beta for iPad version could spawn. Can't wait to try it. I'm a little out of the loop, but I'm seeing the beta testers use it and post their stuff. So soon, maybe. On clothing, say I sculpted a cape with some subdivision levels, so I'd have a different material for the inside. Add thickness to keep the subdivision, but keep both sides separated. There's a couple different ways to tackle that. So if I'm going to sculpt a cape, number one, what I'm probably going to do is here's a plane, edit, make polymesh 3D. You know what? Let's do this. Let's say append. Let's actually make a real cape here. So here and here, go out of solo mode. Let's flip this around. Now I am going to sculpt on one side, but I do want to see both sides. So display properties double. Put this here. And then also what you could do if you want to have a little temporary thickness, geometry, dynamic, turn this on, smooth down to 0, thickness up. So this will give you a little bit of a fake thickness. So now we can go through here and be like, okay, I want to have a cape along here. Now you're going to be, one thing to be careful of is this geometry is, you know, you're going to kind of, oops, let's turn on X symmetry here. There you go. So a cape, really? There you go. A cape will be something like this, right? But we've kind of, oh, here's another thing too. I use this so much. Hold down Alt and move to move along surface normals. That's a huge one. You can do it from any position. So I'll use my move brush to kind of mungle it into position, then hold down Alt to pull along the surface normal. So now this cape is here. Geometry's trash, right? ZRemesher half, depth size down to 0. Boom, new geometry. Now this, if I do Shift D, that turns dynamic off. That's all fake, right? In fact, I'm probably going to do offset of -100 so that the fake geometry goes on the inside. We'll turn that thickness down. So here is my cape that I'm sculpting here. And I'm going to go through, in fact, if I have fake thickness, I think I turn double off. So we're going to go through here and we're going to sculpt a cape. So I'm going to turn off X symmetry. We're going to go down here. Let's hit Control D to subdivide. If you ever want to, if I hit Shift D, if you want to crease just the outside border edges, go into your geometry crease menu, take that crease tolerance up to 180, and then hit crease. That'll crease your open border edges. So now when I hit Control D, it will keep my points relatively sane. So we'll go through here, sculpt this out. So we're going through here and we're going to sculpt a cape. So here's, we got some wrinkles through here. We'll hit Control D again. Now I'm doing this on a single-sided mesh. So I'm going to eventually need to add, add thickness, but I'm going to worry about that in a bit. So here's me sculpting a cape, like so, and then I have subdivision levels of 3. Now if I hit D for dynamic to turn that on, I have some fake thickness, but it's not real. If I want it to be real thickness, I can hit apply, but now I can't reconstruct subdivision history because this is subdivision level 3, and this is basically adding a sub D level 1 thickness. So the inside and outside is good, but the thickness is not great. All I need to do is go through here with my Z modeler brush, insert single edge loop. If I put 1 down the middle, I can now reconstruct once, but no more. So undo that. If I put 1 down the middle and then 1 down the middle of those and hit reconstruct, I can reconstruct twice. And you guessed it, if you have more, all you got to do is, if you had more subdivision, you just go here, 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 and then you could reconstruct back even more. So now we have all of our detail back, we have all of our subdivision levels back, and I went 1 extra, but that's how you can sculpt on one side of the cloth, get it all done, give yourself some thickness, and then add subdivisions down the middle to get subdivision history back. Now the question was, I want to have a material on the inside and the outside. Now, if your resolution is high enough, if you're like, hey, I want these two pieces to be, let's make it obvious, reflection, red reflection, we'll say mRGB, color, fill object. And then on this one here, we'll say I want it to be matte cap white, color, fill object, oh, with mRGB turned on. There we go. Now the problem with this is material assignments especially, they're either on or they're off. So it's going to, you know, might do some weird stuff. If you want a very harsh border between here, we can say delete lower, Control Shift, well, let's do this. I'm going to turn off colorize temporarily. We're just looking at our poly frame here. I'm going to say Control Shift Tap here, make this all one poly group. This is all one poly group. And then I go in here to geometry, modify topology, unweld groups border. And that will put this into its own, like if I go through here and hold down Shift to smooth or turn on Ugh. D for dynamic. Turn off thickness. Turn up smooth. You're going to see... oh, these are all crease. Let's do this. Uncrease all. There we go. You're going to see these are now separate. These are now separate objects here. However, now if I go through here and fill, what was this? White color, fill object, and then fill this one. Let's isolate it with the reflective red color, fill object, mRGB, color, fill object, white color, fill object. You're going to see it is pristine because these are actually separate objects. They're unwelded. Granted, you can go through here and reconstruct back down and then reconstruct back up to get your subdivisions back. They're not welded anymore, but as long as you're not going to go through here and move stuff around and start separating those verts, that might be a way to get you a very, very nice material fill on one side versus the other. Something like that, maybe. Different material insides. Add thickness, keep the subdivisions. Yeah, so you can, reconstruct some of it. You can split things off at the highest, even split it into its own subtool, and then hit reconstruct back down to get your subdivisions back, but still split. Work on any model like head from front, but I can also see from the side view how it's, yeah, like where you want like a side view and a front view. I don't think in ZBrush you can do that. If anybody knows how to do that, shout it out here. I'm not sure. Blender lays subdividing model stuff on easy control edge read, but I've heard that there's something called a Z polish workflow in ZBrush. What is that? I'm not sure. Now, I do a lot of my subdividing modeling in ZBrush. It might be something like, if I'm guessing, make polymesh 3D. Like if you wanted to do an extraction, for instance, like I'm going to extract a little piece off of here. So extract, accept, and then you can say ZRemesher half, depth size down to 0, keep root smooth groups down to 0. And now we've got this shape here, and now I can go through here and do like, inset, polygroup all legacy, and we can inset this here, and then we can say, QMesh, polygroup all. We can QMesh this out, and then say crease PG, crease level of 2, smooth subdiv of 3. We could maybe even do like an inset, polygroup all legacy on this top part here. Let's do Shift D. Maybe a couple times, and then QMesh, polygroup all, hold down Shift, and pull this out. And in fact, maybe even... like we did earlier, split this point here and then do an identical split point, on the back here, and then QMesh, polygroup all, pull that through. In this instance, this is good. So this is why I kind of don't like extractions. So when I extracted this geometry, this topology and this topology is what it is. And then when I ZRemesh this, it's giving me different topology on the inside than it is on the outside. So what I tend to do instead of an extraction, or if I do an extraction, I'll isolate one side, or I don't even have to isolate it. I'll ZRemesh as needed, and then I'll isolate this one, delete hidden, and then I'll QMesh polygroup all through, and then display properties flip, and now the geometry is identical on both sides. So now when I go through and say, split point, I need to know where it is. How many am I in? 1, 2, 1, 2. Here. Sorry. Then when I QMesh through, they'll line up, and then it's easy enough. And then we can go through here again and do our subdividing modeling. So QMesh, polygroup all. So these are all the same. So we'll do polygroup island. So we'll pull this out. I'm gonna tap Alt to get that a new polygroup. We'll do it again. We'll do polygroup polyloop here, and then we'll do maybe an inset with an edge. Face. Inset, polygroup all. There we go. Inset, and then QMesh, and then, I don't know, whatever else you want to do. Crease PG, crease level of 2, smooth subdiv of 3 or 4, whatever. And then you can, box model whatever you're doing on that asset, or creasing, or, whatever you're doing. So maybe something like that, where you're like extracting And if you're extracting geometry too, or if you're not extracting, if you just want to say, you know what, duplicate this off, give me some geometry, Control W, isolate, delete hidden. You can go in here and you can like say polish or polish by feature just to kind of smooth that out. So when you ZRemesh, it doesn't build in that aliasing. Oops. ZRemesh half, half, half. Something like this that you can start working on. And then this one is easier because you can just, you know, polygroup this out. Let's switch over here. Yeah, and then we'll just go through here. We'll hold down Alt. There we go. Punch this through. Crease PG. Dynamic crease level of 2, smooth set of 3, and then you can just switch back and forth and kind of, again, just continue modeling or box modeling or whatever. I don't know. I'm guessing, but maybe something like that. Superhero style capes. Yeah, we kind of went over, here's how you start sculpting it, and then here you can add detail and thickness. If you want to do a dynamic cape, you know, I feel like certainly at some point. Oh, yeah, cape ZRemesh and thickness. Yeah, I think I do have, or if you want like dynamic capes like we did here, that's a little bit trickier, but you can basically just sculpt the shape. So if I want to turn this into a cape, like a nice dynamic cape, so BSH, snake hook brush, to turn that functionality on. Let's turn off X symmetry. You can go through here and be like, whew. Wait, Sculptors Pro. There we go. So Sculptors Pro turned on. We're going through here and we're sculpting out this crazy, you know, spawn style cape, right? There we go. And now I want to, let's turn the Sculptors Pro off. You can control drag the Dynamesh if you want. But now I've got my cape shape. So again, I have backface masking turned on underneath my brush auto masking section, so I'm not masking through the object. Control W, isolate, delete hidden, polish, ZRemesh half, go through here and ZRemesh your cape. Control D to subdivide, again, crease 180 so you can, doesn't melt your mesh. Go through here and sculpt your cape and your cape wrinkles and make it all dynamic and you know, whatever you want to do. And then when I'm finally ready, I can say, let's delete lower. You could just extrude, so extrude, polygroup all, and just extrude a thickness if you don't want to use dynamic thickness. So if you go inwards, you got a display properties flip, or you can just go outwards. And then this is where we can go through here and say, okay, insert single edge lip. So here's 1 subdivision, 2 subdivisions, 3 subdivisions, reconstruct. There we go. It's like I'm overshooting that a little bit. That's fine. So now we've got thickness back, we've got our details back, we've got our cloth. Same on both sides. You could also do a morph diff to get you thickness. You could do dynamic thickness. There's a couple different ways you could do it, but something like that. Okay, we're 8 o'clock. Let me get these last couple in. CC4 goes Z to send the base mesh to ZBrush. It goes through all my project tools, updating them instead of just adding the base mesh as a new tool. And that, what I would do in that case is go Z over my base mesh and then append my stuff to my base mesh. If you do want to send over a base mesh or anything from other Go Z, go in here to Preferences, Go Z, and turn on Import as Subtool. So that way when you're Go Zing, it won't create something new. It'll append to whatever subtool you have selected. Rework texture part of foreground image, which did not scan well. Yes, I do, actually. So I'd have a photogrammetry playlist that'll go over that. But in here, we also, it'll be history project. It's not history project, damn it. It's what's it called? It is called brush extractor. So we use extractor brush to scan data cleanup. So you can actually sample from another area of your object and go through here and use that to like, hey, I'm going to use this part to kind of replace this texture and go through here and clean up the sculpt and all that good stuff. So check out this one here. I think is what you're looking for. Yeah. Check this one out. What's the name of the tech feature in ZBrush where you can combine organic shapes together and adjust them and control how they blend together? Oh yeah, that was wait, was it? I know you can say, so if we do a remesh, let's do this, auto groups, W, remesh by union. So we have this here. Let's do a ZRemesher half, tap slice down to 0, keep groups. And then we have a polygroup border here. So I think, oh, what's it called? It's a plugin. There's an intersection masker, but that's for two separate objects. You can do Bevel Pro. And then these two, wherever these two objects are, you can go through here. Oh, it's been a while since I've used this, but like bevel amount, you can change this. This is a little preview. You can turn on, it can be bevel chamfer. Let's say preview edges. So there's my edges. So you can go through here and you can say, okay, I want my bevel to be this much or that much, how smooth the bevel is, polygroup angle, chamfer or bevel, auto apply. Okay, so you can get a preview of this. We can say, you know what, I want it to be a real big fat bevel. I don't need that much mesh resolution. Chamfer, I like bevel better. Yeah, something like this maybe. And then when you hit OK, you'll still have to ZRemesh half. Or no, you don't have to ZRemesh, you can do ZRemesh same or whatever. But ZRemesh the result, but you do have nice clean polygroups, so it will do a fairly decent job. There's that. Is that I don't combine organic shapes and adjust them and control how they blend together. There's that. I mean, you can dynamesh organic shapes together and change the resolution, but that's not much. I'm not sure. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I need something to jog my memory. I can't think of it. I am an object. This is a simple strip of geo. You kind of. So you can go in here to BC brush curve flat snap, and you can use this. Let's go ahead and get rid of our history here. Control tap twice. You can use this to kind of drag flat strips of geometry, and then you can tap off and say project all. So that's under subtool. Instead of using history project, we can say project O. We can't say project all because this is all part of one subtool, but you can go in here and say split mask points in your split menu, and then now you can say project all, and that will go ahead and project this. Now we may need to crank that distance up so it grabs it all. There we go. So now this is snapped to that surface, and in fact, once you have this, you can say go into your comma key, go in here to brush. There's a Z modeler brush underneath Z that's all set up for topology. So if you load that up, I have it auto loaded in my brush menu here. So if I go down here to Z modeler topo, if I hover over an edge, it's set to extrude, snap to surface. If I hover over a face, it's set to do nothing. If I hover of a point, it's move by brush radius, snap to surface, attraction. So I can go through here and I can say just extrude edges, and it's snapping to the surface. I can hold down, start moving and tap Alt. It'll do an entire edge ring. I can go over here, tap Alt, or hold down Alt. It'll do an edge ring or an entire edge loop. Or you can just go through here and do edge by edge. And you can also, as you're extruding these out, let's turn off Ghost. As you're extruding these, that's why it wasn't snapping. Okay, so make sure you don't have, because if you have Ghost turned on, it doesn't respect the surface and it just goes out. But if you have transparent with Ghost off, now when I tap Alt, you can see it's all snapping to the surface. So now we can go through here. And again, if I just want to do this edge here, just tap Alt. That's doing all of them. Yeah, we can just do these two here. You can also, by point, you can just move this and it'll snap in here, and then it'll just kind of, you can go through here and merge points together and move and snap. And if anything ever just like, oh, dang it, this one got off the surface. No problem. Just do another projectile. Boop. Snap it back down. So you can, ooh, let's take this so you can see it. There we go. There you go. So you can use this. Let's do an uncrease all as well. So now we can go through here and kind of use this as kind of a quad draw. And again, that's just all set up under, you know, ZModeler. Boop, boop, move here. And if you want to, you can say, you know what, I want to split this edge here and then just continue working extruding edges. Oops. Make sure you go back to your extrude. I forgot. There we go. Ding, ding. Oh, so that was a strip of geo. Now you could make your own. So like in the brush that I made, I have like a plane mid. You could make, or a bend curve, you know, that does this. You could just make a strip of geo. So you could say, you know what, polymesh plane, make polymesh 3D, grab this here, delete hidden, ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0. So here's my strip. B, create insert mesh, append here. So now when I go back here, I can say, zoop, there we go. And while I'm doing this, if you want it to automatically snap to the underlying object, go in here to brush, modifiers, projection strength up to 100. So now when you pull out that strip of geo, it's automatically snapping to the underlying surface. So if we drag this across and then we say split mask points, and then we go in here with our ZModeler topology brush, we can go through here and then just continue. Yeah, so here's one, and then hold down Alt, and we have snap turned on. So now you can go through here and do your whole, you know, moving and snapping and all that good stuff. Is there a way we can extrude to specific units? There are plugins, I think. There's ZBrush plugins. I want to say there's like layer depth brush for specific millimeter values. There's IMM extractors that do no, not that one. IMM draw size to millimeters, precision extract to millimeters. You can download those plugins, but as far as like extruding, let's see, let's do this. Extrude, polygroup all, and then here I want this to go up a specific amount. What I would maybe do in this case is that you can hit W and then hit Y, and then you can use, wait, W, Y, that turns off Gizmo and puts you into, what is this mode? Transpose line mode, and then you can actually go in here to preferences, transpose, it's transpose units. So this is what you would look up, is like transpose units, to go through here and tell it I want it to do millimeters or feet, and then you could what's it called, give it different units. So like maybe you wanted to go up to this, maybe this is 1 inch or 1 millimeter or whatever, so you can hit W, or you can say let's do transpose polygroup all, and then I want to go from this point here straight up, so then I can hit move, and then I can just up to that point, boop, but it's not going to be. Now if we're talking like that's a millimeter, then it's like, well, how do I get it exactly? We're talking like NASA tolerances right here. Like these are minute movements. Now if this is a foot, then yeah, you probably do want to be able to snap it to a foot, but that's a little bit more difficult. Gosh, I really don't know. Extrude. I don't do that much precision modeling in ZBrush, so I don't know that there's a value in here. Now, I will say, you know, if I want, you know, to extrude this much out and then I want to do the exact same thing later, that's when you can go through here and be like, okay, these two, just tap. This one, just tap, and it'll maintain, all that distance will be the same, but it's not, I don't know if there's a value you can type in. Yeah. Doing a mop head. A couple of what you fiber mesh or insert mesh. Fiber mesh is probably the easier way. So poly mesh here. Mask the bottom. Go in here and say, I'll make it a simple one, but we'll go in here and say, oh boy, where is it? Fiber mesh, preview, modifiers, white. And once you've done all this, you can save a preset so you don't have to do this again. But basically we'll do length, coverage, max fibers down. We'll do zero twist. We'll do gravity up. And I'm also going to down here, segments up, profile up. So now I've got, let's turn off transparency. So there's our mop here, or at least some geometry for our mop. So we go in here and say accept here. And in fact, let's turn on, now that I see that, I want to actually turn off preview settings, fast preview. So now we can go through here and hold down control and mask and W, let's hit Y, go to unmesh mesh center, hold down alt. You can kind of start modifying this in order to, you know, do whatever mop heady things you want to do. And in fact, since this is a profile of 4, you can actually go in here and inflate, you know, D for dynamic if you want to treat it like, you know, whatever geometry, but probably something like that. Texture realistic, red demon in Substance Painter doesn't, whatever I do, the material looks so basic, doesn't matter how much more depth I add to it. Do you have any advice for that? Realistic red demon. Oh, guys, so like you're doing like, how do I make, there, if you Google like Substance Painter skin, you'll get all sorts of good stuff. As far as me in particular, if you go to like a skin, basically I usually take scan data. So the character creator pipeline face and body, you'll see I go through here and I do bake, you know, scan data to Painter, and then I modify that. I think I'm trying to see if there's like a sizzle video. I do vampire. Oh, you know what? My ArtStation page has all the sizzle stuff. So if you ever go in here and be like, hey, what's a weird vampire with skin? Usually I'll go through and show how it's working. So, you know, I was using ZBrush, doing this. I'm baking out the, it's stylized. Yeah, here we go. So I have a live stream on this. Just search for vampire. But basically we went through and we sculpted in ZBrush. Here's our ZBrush. And then we bake that out in Substance Painter, use that as our base, and then go through and modify that base in order to get a nice, rich, you know, if you're doing, that's the other thing too, is if you're doing red demon skin, I don't have a great example. Yeah, let me do this. Hold on, give me a sec. Sorry, I need to hide this from you. I just don't know what I don't want you to see. It's all secret. You can't know. Shoot. I have to use everything to find anything on my computer. Vampire poly paint. Boom. Open path. Okay, it's a Z project. Good. Cancel. Load it up. So if I'm doing a red demon, one thing to consider is don't just do color fill red. That'll give you a red, but it's not going to give you like any of this subtlety or skin buildup, right? So this is where if I'm going to make a red demon, I can go in here to poly paint, adjust colors, frame, and then we'll do a hue shift over to something a little more red or ruddy, and then RGB intensity, RGB contrasts. I'll probably start with something like this. So I'll say, okay. Now, is that a red demon? No, but at least there's like blood pooling and, you know, visual breakup and veins underneath the surface of the skin. So if you go and watch that, we talk about, you know, layering up skin basically. Now, once you've done that, that's when you can go back in here, RGB turned on, maybe RGB intensity down, swap this out with like a hard alpha 23, nice red texture. And then you can go in here and start like layering in red. But it's not going to be just red, right? It's going to be, well, around the, let's turn off dynamic. Around the eyes is going to be maybe a little more purpley red. And then on the forehead, maybe a little more orangey red. You know, just don't, my biggest advice to give you, let's turn off lazy mouse, is to break it up. Don't make it just a uniform red fill, because to your point, it's going to look like, ugh, it's just red plastic on my character. Why? You want variation. You want all the little specks and doodads and veins and you know, blood pools in certain areas, and then bone comes through in other areas. It'll be a little bluer, and then you know, golden zones, red zones, blue zones of the face, all of that stuff you can take into consideration. Now, granted, Hulk skin is kind of tough. Red skin is kind of tough. You know, you got to kind of play with it and see if you can't get it to message appropriately to your audience that, yes, the red is skin, but yes, it is a living creature underneath this red skin. But we don't usually see a lot of red skin things, so there's kind of a disconnect built in. Let's see. It's possible to work on a rotated object symmetry. Yes. Usually what I'll do is I'll make an object in an A pose, and then I'll go and pose it out, and then just sculpt in the asymmetrical stuff. But if you want to, you can go in here to transform, use posable symmetry. Make sure that project, it's a little bit squirrely. That's why I tend to not use it. But you can, you know, if it is a perfectly symmetrical base mesh here, there you go. So we have a symmetrical base mesh here. Let's turn on lazy mouse. So if I tap X to go out of X symmetry, and then mask this head, actually mask lasso. And then we want to kind of, I don't know. And in fact, if we are going to pose, if you have subdivision history, which you should, now we know how to do that. I would say use that to your advantage so you can have a nice soft, you know, I'll put this right here, and then, so we've turned the head and we've got subdivision on here. And I think if you go in here to transform, activate symmetry across the x-axis, use posable symmetry, now you can still go in here and we still have symmetry turned on. Just be very careful with your line of symmetry. Way we can move an object along a surface normal like a surface snap. Yes, for ZModeler, we showed that. So just back this video up and you'll see us snapping as we extrude edges along a normal. If you're using Sculptris Pro, if we go through here, for example, and we just say, geez, Dynamesh, no. So we have an object here, and I'm going to have another object here and say split mass points. X symmetry off. Oh yeah, posable symmetry off. Delete posable symmetry. There we go. So, and also X symmetry off. So we have an, oh yeah, and I also have projection strength still turned on my IMM brush. So modifiers. Projection strength down. There we go. So we have an object here, and let's say I want to move this surface across another surface. So I'm not extruding an edge with ZModeler, but I want to move this across. So BSH snake hook, and if you want to turn on Sculptris Pro, it'll tessellate on the fly. So if you hold down Alt, it will kind of move across the surface, I think. Is that it? Alt, Alt, Alt. Is that doing it? I feel like that's the hotkey for that. Yeah, I think holding down Alt with Sculptris Pro will slide a surface across another one, kind of. Now, in this instance, if I go into move, you can go to the side and you can say, okay, let me move that out. What I tend to do in this case is hold down Alt, and then that moves along the surface normal. And you can do that from any direction. So if I'm over here in this camera angle and I hold down Alt, it's going to look at that surface normal and just pull along there. I don't have to like move my camera and use the move brush. I can have my camera anywhere and just hold down Alt and just move along that surface normal away from your surface. I don't live stream on my channel. I need to start again, but I'm on Pixelonic's channel, so that's where the notification would come from. Best tools in ZBrush for hard surface modeling is ZBrush, or probably Booleans and ZModeler, which we've covered in this video. Sculpting your character symmetrically before, but then pose it. Dynamic symmetry and stroke. Symmetry is, yeah. Is there an option to project with slight offset from the surface? I feel like dynamic has an offset built in. If you want to use like collision volumes and inflate, you can snap and have it have an inflate value. But as far as snapping, but also building in, what you could do, for example, BTO topology brush, you can go through here and be like, okay, I'm going to make some geometry. And then if I make it draw size of 1 and then tap, it'll just give me, let's say split mass points. So it'll give me flat geo just sitting on a surface. And then if I go in here and I say, hey, actually this isn't on my surface and I want it to be, that's when we go in here to project all. However, we want an air pocket in here. So what we could do is we could say project all and then dynamic thickness. And so, and you could actually set the offset to negative or to 100. So in reality, your geometry is here, but your dynamic thickness is automatically pushing that off. So if that's built in, if we go back here to BTO topology brush. So again, we're going to make some more topology here. And again, we already know if I turn my draw size down to 1 and we tap, it's going to, the lower surface is going to be snapped, but then my dynamic surface is going to be raised above based on this value here. It's not real, but you can make it real. It's dynamic apply, and then Control Shift tap these top poly groups, delete hidden, and then now you've got your pocket of air. Maybe. Polygroup by UV. Yes, polygroup by UV is, I'll use that occasionally. Heck, maybe even on this guy. I think he has, does he have UVs? Let's see. No. But if he did, you could do polygroup by UV, and that'll take your UV shells and give it their own polygroup. And if I missed any, thank you everybody for shouting out, because I probably missed some questions, but it sounds like they're getting answered. That's good. Crease all the polygroups and also the corners of the edges. Unfortunately, again, we'll say delete lower. To that point, if you have an object here and we tap off with thickness, let's do it a little thinner. There we go. So we'll say split mass point. So in this instance, yes, it's easy enough. You can just go in here and you can say, you know, group by normals and then crease PG, or just run a crease with a crease tolerance of 45. That'll crease your corners. And then when you hit D for dynamic or Control D, that'll crease. There you go. That'll keep your corners creased. However, if you have a single-sided object, even with this outside creased, it's still going to do this. So what I would do is give yourself a little bit of temporary what is going on here? Oh, I had it hidden. Delete hidden. Give yourself some temporary geo, and then go ahead and crease, and then subdivide and do whatever you want. And then isolate this. We'll say delete lower, delete hidden, and now you've got nice tight corners. I think there might be a better way to do that, but that's usually what I do. Thank you for the kind words, Sonar 2020. ZBrush is deleting my undo history. It might be a memory thing, but edit. Here's all your undo stuff, and I think underneath preferences, undo history. There's some other max undo history and compression, reserved undo memory. You might need to crank up a little bit, maybe. Can't open my browser and use ZBrush at the same time because my memory. Oh, yep, that memory is your problem. Yeah, that's a good one. Anyway, I should go. It's 8:35. I'm 35 minutes over. I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the questions. That was fun. I'll try and figure out a way where I can get my models from y'all and kind of use your models and do demos, because that's fun too. Oh, one more. Do you have any way to avoid character creator moving the position of the model in Go Z? Character creator moving the position of the model in Go Z. Well, yeah, if you send something over and character creator moves it and you send it back, it is going to definitely move your model. So what you would need to do is Go Z from ZBrush to character creator, and that'll snap the character creator mesh into position. However, character creator has a built-in functionality where the feet of your object are always on the floor, just a character thing. So in that case, to maintain parity, I usually Go Z from CC to ZBrush just to get my feet on the floor in character creator, my feet on the floor in ZBrush, and that's what I roll with. You can build in a little foot, like a little flip-flop pad underneath the feet to keep things consistent, but yeah, it gets weird. I apologize. I don't know a real big good workaround for that. But anyway, thanks again, everybody. I'll let you get back to it and have a cool Tuesday. Today's Tuesday.